Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 257. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of You-Know. We're also joined by friend of the show, Mark Vickers. Mark won our Sensei Super Snuggie caption contest, and his grand prize was to not only get a trade, but he also gets to join us on the show for some segments that he's choosing. And our plan was to talk about 3 different books on this episode, but we talked about Red Robin number 22, which is part of this Azrael crossover storyline that featured Batman, Red Robin, and Gotham City Sirens. And this issue was focused on Tim's journey and Tim's trial. And because it was so focused on him and this religious aspect and Tim's own approach to religion, we got on this great tangent about religion in comics and Tim Drake's background and his whole feeling on this. And it wound up being just this really cool discussion that you can get from a comic sometimes. So I'm hoping that everybody really enjoys this because it's a different episode than we've done. And I think, anytime you have stuff like this, it just adds such validity to what superhero comics are capable of doing and what kind of stories they're capable of telling. So I hope you guys really enjoy this. We also have a number of listener voicemails, that some of which lead into our next episode. Some of them talk about previous episodes. So please make sure to call into our show voicemail line. We love having you and your thoughts a part of the show. Plus, we also discuss things like the Wonder Woman cancellation and things like that. So, please feel free to call in anytime with anything that you find related to DC that you'd like to share on our podcast. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Supporting us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source, they have Red Robin number 25, written by Fabian Nicieza, art and cover by Marcus II and Ray McCarty. If he's going to avoid a fight against a psycho supervillain, the 7 Days of Death, win the Assassin Tournament, and discover ancient knowledge over life and death, Red Robin will have to survive a final battle against one of the world's deadliest assassins. Her name, Cassandra Cain. Regularly $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79 at DCBService.com. And we're talking about Red Robin on this episode and why you should be reading it. Over at InStockTrades.com, if you haven't been reading this series, Red Robin the Grail trade paperback's available. And this collects issues 1 through 5 by Christopher Yost, Raymond Box, and Art Thiebaert, with a cover artist Francis Manapul. Regularly $17.99, 38% off, only $11.15. And remember, orders of $50 or more get you free shipping. I also want to shout out the Summit City Comic Con, June 18th, 2011, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., the Grand Wayne Convention Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it's SummitCityComicCon.com. That's all one word, and there's a handy-dandy link in our show notes. Definitely check out the amazing guest list of creators that are coming to that convention, and make sure to consider stopping by. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth in the plotline, story twist, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
A scarlet costume ejects from his ring, and in a blur of motion, police scientist Barry Allen becomes the Flash.
Joining us for this special episode is friend of the show, Mark Vickers. And Mark, you won our Sensei Super Snuggie caption contest. And thank you for your patience. I'm really glad to have you finally on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We were chatting back and forth. You threw out 3 books. I'm like, we haven't talked about those in a while, so just come on and let's talk all of them. You picked Red Robin, you picked Superboy, and Teen Titans. And we're going to start with chatting about Red Robin. Why Red Robin? Why was that one of the ones that jumped out at you as a book that you wanted to talk about?
Well, Tim Drake Wayne is actually my favorite superhero, so it was definitely the one that I wanted to talk about. Reading comics, I actually really started reading them in college. One of my roommates was a big Batman fan, and he would let me read his comics. And reading those comics, I actually grew to like Tim more than I did Bruce. So that's why I picked Red Robin.
He's one of those characters that I think in his solo series has always been very consistent. Like this book, I still consider this to be the Robin book that it always was. I mean, yeah, it's labeled Red Robin now, but it totally feels like it's that same title just continuing again, which is a testament, because I was really worried when that book was going to be canceled that we were going to lose what was special about having a solo Tim, Drake, Wayne, whatever you want to call his last name. I still find myself referring to him as either Tim Drake or Tim Wayne, and I'm not really sure which anymore, because it does seem like it's gone back to him being Tim Drake.
I really like where he said, a reporter asked him the question in a different Red Robin episode if it was Tim Drake or Tim Wayne. And he said, if I need a table, it's Tim Wayne, but when I'm with my friends, it's Tim Drake.
I like that answer, too.
I pretty much call him Tim Drake all the time.
Yeah, I find I'm doing that as well. And it's, exactly what you just said with, that scene where it was like, when I'm looking in the mirror, or when I'm looking for a table, I like that distinction, and I'm actually finding myself doing that. There are times when I call him Tim Drake, and there's times when I call him Tim Wayne, and it's no longer, it depends on the circumstance. Whenever he's in the costume, I usually call him Tim Drake, because, you'd think that's a Tim Wayne moment, because he's, Bruce's kid, but for me, the Tim Wayne is kind of his illusion, his disguise, his, that's his, his hidden, how he's trying to hide, what he actually does is by adopting the Tim Wayne persona. And when he's in Red Robin, that's the real him. That's Tim Drake in the costume doing the hero bit.
I don't think that the last name defines his allegiances, his family background, or anything. Like, I do believe he's Bruce's adopted son. I don't think that changes whether we call him Tim Drake or Tim Wayne. He's had more than one father because of the relationship between him and Bruce. He became Robin so young, and really came into his own so young. I mean, that discovery of Bruce Wayne being Batman that he did way back in Lonely Place of Dying, I think just set him apart as a character that you just need to watch and you want to follow. And his solo miniseries, the first ones when they kicked off, kind of introducing him as a potential solo character and really getting to know who he was, again, set him apart as one of those characters. So, and I think what we saw with Identity Crisis, with his father passing away, I thought Bruce became a father to Tim, a father figure to Tim, long before then. For example, I have my father, but I also have my mom remarried. I have a stepfather who, is also a father to me as well. So I think it's, in our society, it's very normal to look at people and say they have more than one parent. I don't think it takes anything away from Jack Drake's role in Tim's life to consider Bruce his father figure. I think it's one of the reasons why we as fans jump back and forth. And it adds a reality to the kid. I think that's why it's important to talk about this, because it adds a reality to this character that I don't think you always see. And it's something that I love because it's like females that don't take their husband's name. If they choose to keep their maiden name, I don't think they're less married because they've still got the other name. So I think there is something that applies there. I don't think the last name defines that, and I love that we can kind of flip flop between the two with the character. I don't know. It just I don't know that I ever want it fully defined. Like, do you want them to pick or choose between one of the two and say this is definitive? Your definite last name for Tim?
I would sort of like to see him, I mean, I understand the Tim Drake Wayne. I would sort of like to see him stick with Drake just because it would sort of honor his original parents, if that makes any sense. Them both being dead and having passed, I wouldn't want the name Drake to be lost.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo sentiments on that. I'd kind of, if they were to define it, do the definitive definition, I would want it to be Drake as well for a lot of the similar reasons. And just you think about going back to when the way his father died. I still get a little emotional when I think about that scene when he's talking over the radio and he's talking, saying, tell him I'm proud of him. I'm proud of what you're doing, and it's not your fault. And just those last ditch effort parent moments where he's like, he doesn't want Tim to blame himself for his death, and he knows, he knows it's coming. He's always, I'm going to fight this, but odds are I'm going to go down here. But I want to make sure my son realizes that I'm proud of him and that I love him, and just those fatherly moments. Now, as I'm saying this, Bruce had some great fatherly moments with Tim as well, but there is just something with it just still rings in my heart, and I still want to see him hold on to that Drake name just for kind of reasons like that. I don't see
Bruce adopting him as Bruce trying to make him give that up, though. And I think Bruce would be very comfortable with him saying that, he's still Tim Drake. Because Bruce's whole point was, he went through the same thing that Tim did. And his heart was crushed seeing Tim go through it. This is something, he was racing there for the purpose, Bruce was racing there for the purpose of trying to put a stop to it, trying to make sure it didn't happen to Tim, knowing what Tim was going through in those horrible moments, almost himself seeing his own life flash before his eyes with what he dealt with. And I think in those moments he was doing everything he could to be an Alfred to Tim. You know, because Bruce never gave up his parents when Alfred took over the parent role. In many ways, Bruce became Tim's Alfred while still having an Alfred for Tim to have as well. So, I mean, he really was trying to say, hey, with the fact that I've adopted you now, you've got a legacy, you've got, he's going to be Tim's secure for life. No matter what happens, he's going to have that Wayne fortune, that, you know, chance to be something, regardless. So it was something, especially at his age. Remember, Tim was a teenager when all that went down. So he's really making sure that he didn't become like under somebody else's care, or the uncle came into the scene at the one point in time and was trying to take over his role. So I really loved how Bruce did that. And I think that's why I'm so comfortable with them flipping between the name, depending on the circumstance. You know, if it's a formal situation where he's there as Bruce's son, it's Tim Wayne. But when, you know, it's really honoring who he is, he's Tim Drake. And that, to me, makes the most sense. Because I don't want to see that character given up.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the new ABC lineup. My two Alfreds.
Yeah, could you see that being a comedy?
I think it would work. I think it would work well. You got the, you know, the more gruff Alfred, and then the, you know, the more, you know, British proper, you know, prim and proper Alfred.
Red Robin 22. I'm just
You're just going to ignore me.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to go talking about a sitcom with you. You know, this issue of Red Robin 22 is actually something I'd like to talk about, because it was a continuation of a storyline. But yet, in many ways, I've read this issue now in preparing for this episode, because we were going to record last week, and with moving it to this week for the recording, I've read it again. So I've read this issue 4 times now. And one of the things that's really struck me with the last 2 read-throughs, and today I went through, I actually went through and did 3 pages of notes, new notes, just because I got struck by different things this time around that shocked me. It's a very contained issue, even though it's in this story arc. One thing I'd like to talk about, though, before we continue into our discussion point, is what is our exposure to, because we've got Azrael in this, we've got the Crusader in this, Ra's al Ghul. Batman's in this Dick Grayson Batman I'm talking about, in that he makes like a sort of cameo to set, you know, what he's doing during this storyline and why he isn't more involved with what Tim's going through in this trial, quote unquote, of his. What is our exposure to the Azrael storyline and the issues that led up to this? Like, Mark, did you read any of that leading up to this, or was this your first issue of this crossover? What was your background to this particular storyline?
This was actually the first issue of this crossover that I've read. I've never read Azrael, so all of my exposure to Azrael is actually from listening to Raging Bullets when you all talk about it. And Ra's al Ghul I have read in various Batman and Robin and Red Robin comics.
I guess the question I have, and I'm not going to ask you the question, Jim, because I know you read it all. So I mean, it's kind of a silly question. You and I are in the same position there. We've read Azrael, and then we read the preludes to this story arc. The question I have for you, Mark, is we had another listener who called in and said that this issue was like jarring for them when they initially read it because they were dropped into this storyline. Did you feel that this issue was one where, as a reader, you were kind of lost to what was going on, or did you along the way pick up what was going on in this issue? How did this issue go for you?
I sort of knew what was going on when I picked it up, because I do look on the DC Comics website, and, you know, they'll say part whatever, or this comic is a part of the 3-part, and it's also going on in Catwoman. So I knew it was a crossover title. But it felt like I could figure out what was going on reading it, because they do sort of explain it as it goes. And I also, listening to the Raging Bullets podcast, heard you all talk about it, I guess with Dick Grayson before, where he got stabbed. I don't remember which issue it was.
Yeah. That was the issue, actually, that took place right before this one.
Yeah, so I knew the basics of the storyline, but I did end up actually picking up the Catwoman issue, or the Gotham City Sirens, I'm sorry, which I had never read before just because I want to see what happens in the storyline. So.
Well, that actually kind of leads into my next question. I was going to ask you, how did you feel about this? Did you like it? Obviously, you liked the story. Did you like the storyline enough? Obviously, well, I mean, I don't think if you didn't like the storyline, you wouldn't have picked up Gotham City Sirens, so it's kind of a no-brainer on that one.
Yeah. No, I really like the storyline, and honestly, I may have picked up the Gotham City Sirens anyway because the cover art on it was amazing. Just that picture of Catwoman. But I'm a person, if I start a story, I can't stand not to finish it.
Yeah.
So it made me really curious to see what happens next. So, yeah, they got me to buy another comic by doing a crossover. So
that cover was really good.
Yeah, that was
that Sirens cover that he was mentioning.
Kind of the angel type of look, and
yeah, we never really talked about that one on the show, but the cover, that's stunning. The issue was very good too, but I just meant it was one of those. Woof.
Yeah,
that's one of the things I like about you. You mentioned, Mark, the Source blog and the DC Comics website. One of the things I like about going there is they'll do cover art and preview art on there, and I actually saw that cover art before it was coming out from their site. And I love when they do those every so often because you'll get to see some, and so they'll do the alternative covers a lot of times too, where you get to see those. And I really love that. And I encourage listeners, if you don't go to DC's website, in the last 5 years or so, especially, every year it seems like they've just been adding more and more content, more and more interactivity. And with the blog there now, it's really a daily destination if you're a DC fan, whether you're reading every title or just a handful of them. It is a great way, like Mark said, to see what's going on in other books storyline-wise and know maybe what you should be picking up, if there's going to be a crossover, or at least to give you kind of a background. If you're, budget-wise, you're reading that one title and saying, okay, I can't pick up the other 3 things that go along with this, but here's just kind of an overview of kind of what's been going on and where, so I know where to go from there. I'm actually glad to hear that the internet's, because I can't speak to that experience because I read all the issues leading up to this, but it's great to have somebody on who did have that experience and know that the internet has become a resource where you can kind of like find out what you need to know to continue following your favorite title.
Yeah, it's really helpful to me, but I have to be careful because I do get to where if I see something that looks really cool, I want to buy it, and I end up blowing my budget. So I have to be really careful to only buy the stuff, even if I want something, to stick with the stuff I really like to read. Because they got me to buy that Gotham City Sirens and Brightest Day 23 just by the cover art. So.
Oh wow! You were not reading Brightest Day leading up to that, but it led you to grab the issue just because you like the cover art.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, most of my reading in the past has actually been in trades. I usually read trades. There's Red Robin is one of the titles that I've tried to, whenever I can, pick up in single issues. But usually I read stuff in trades because I get to start a story and finish it in one read through.
I read a lot of my Vertigo stuff. Actually, it's funny. I switched over to monthlies on those only, yet I still read them in what they're collected in, the arcs, for just the reason you're saying. And the only reason why I switched over to monthlies on them is because I want my dollar to count in some weird way to the books not being canceled. But I don't know that necessarily helps at all because you hear like a mixture of commentary as far as like trades count for this, trades. To me, I think comic companies nuts if they're not looking at their trade program and saying this is a book that has a lot of validity in trade. Because I do think some characters and some concepts lead themselves more to be read in a trade format.
Yeah, it's hard for me to stick to the trades. Whenever I say I'm just going to get it in trades, I usually end up later down the line getting the monthlies. And I don't know, it's just something. I'm doing pretty good on the Vertigo side and some of the non-DC stuff. I'm doing pretty good. But when, like with the Tim here, I would have, I'd be going nuts if I had to wait for the full trade on Red Robin. And there's a couple, like Secret Six. There's no way I'm waiting on that. And there's just some titles that it would be almost impossible for me to wait on the trades. And it's I understand why people do it, and it's a very viable way and a good way to read it because you do get the full story arc. It's just me personally, I kind of have that, that impulsiveness where I'm like, I gotta have this.
Well, I have that too, but actually kind of going along with what Mark's saying, there are a lot of titles that I do read. Let's take the DC thing out of it. And this isn't a commentary on any other company being lesser than DC to me. We're doing a podcast that comes out weekly. So, I mean, a lot of my immediacy with my reading is also enhanced by the fact that I want to keep up with what's going on in case we're going to talk about it on the show, in case a listener calls in about it. Because we'll get voicemails, and we'll get emails, and forum comments, and Facebook, and stuff like that. So I want to be in the loop for those type of things. So there is not only the quality of the comics, which is very high, but then there's also that we've got this show going. Taking that out of the equation, though, and looking at companies like Marvel and Boom and IDW and Dynamite and stuff like that are publishing a lot of great material, I can't read everything that I want to read. Dark Horse, but when I can, I'll pick up a trade here and there of titles that I just know are top quality because of top quality creators and things like that. And I'm incredibly satisfied that I have the opportunity to read those books because, I don't have an unlimited budget, and yet I like so much material that's being published in comics. And the sad part is, too, it used to be that TV tie-ins were awful. Now they're good again. There's so many good ones out there for TV tie-ins. So now some of my favorite programs that are either on the air and have these additional ones, or off the air, like Buffy, great example of that, they're good. So I'm reading those things and picking them up in trade. And so there is a lot of great product out there to read in a variety of different avenues. Then there's digital. Comics are too easy to get now, and that's a good thing. But back to Red Robin, because we go on a whole tangent about ways to get our comics. With this issue in particular, we had a fill-in art by Freddie Williams, which I thought was terrific, and I'm going to talk about specific panels along the way that I really enjoyed. But I love the way Fabian Nicieza took the concept of faith that is so much a part of Azrael and used it as an opportunity to explore Tim's concept of faith and why he would feel so disconnected from it. I think this told us something about Tim at his core and how the loss of so many close to him affected him, which was something I thought that was really interesting. And in my later read-throughs, I really kind of focused on this is a journey that we're going on with Tim where he's exploring his concept of faith. And I think this is a testament to what Tim Drake's books are about. I like reading about Tim Drake because I feel like I know him like a friend. And I feel like we get to go into his flaws, his weaknesses, his strengths, his inner dialogue, he's been a very well-developed character. And this is something where I'm like, I did not know this about him. We don't see him explore his concept of religion much in the comics. And I love when comics aren't afraid to do this, because it's kind of a risky venture to go into religion with any character and explore this. I loved this. I thought it was, a very intelligent storyline that wasn't just done for shock value. It was done for the purpose of tying into this great Azrael storyline that's been going on, but showing how it would affect him.
And it made sense to me that this would be, Tim's line and, the way he looked at life. And for that's something that really was important for me when they're going through and explaining this. And you look at Tim, what he's been through, what the pain he's been through. But also, I love those moments when they show him kneeling and praying in costume. And he's like, but anger solved little. And when the world was in crisis, I prayed. I heard only silence. That for me was just a really cool kind of just moment and thought process of where his head is around this. He wanted to have faith, he wanted to have it, but there wasn't that background for him. There wasn't that, belief structure, and he is a very scientific, very deductive, analytical type of person. And when you're dealing with religion, when you're dealing with faith, sometimes you have to throw the logic out. And you just got to follow your heart. You got to go with your gut. And for Tim, I could see a detective mindset that he has. This would be where his thought process is.
The panel where we see Jack Drake's hand in the blood, in his blood, and you see the reflection from Identity Crisis of Bruce holding Tim in that moment. It was something to me. I love the different viewpoint on this death. I just thought it was a very moving sequence in Identity Crisis and love that Freddie had a chance to put a different artistic spin on it. I think it captured a lot of emotion in one panel, which emotion was very important to capture in the beginning of this, because we're seeing a character who's disconnected from any form of religion. And there's all kinds of different ways of looking at religion, whether somebody believes in God or not, or, it doesn't matter. I think people all come to that point where they're comfortable with themselves and how they view the concept of religion. Tim isn't in this issue. It's really clear that he does not know how he sees religion in any level. And it bothers him that he doesn't. And that's something where that discomfort, I thought, was very human and very real. Because I think he'll come to a point in his life, and I hope we do get to see that at some point, where we get to see him kind of come to any kind of realization, whether it's believes in God or decides that he doesn't or whatever. I'd love to see him come to a feeling comfortable at the end, because I really liked this journey because it felt so real and natural.
Yeah, and I gotta admit that scene with the reflection in the blood, when I was my first read through, I didn't notice the reflection was an image. I just thought that was just, the cool shadowing in the blood, and then it wasn't my second read through. I looked, I'm like, wait, is that a bat symbol? And then I turned it upside, I inverted the comic. I'm like, oh my God, this is brilliant. And I kind of, it was one of those moments where I kicked myself for not seeing it. And then after every other read through after that, it's so glaring to me. I'm like, how could you miss this the first time? You're an idiot, Jim. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that panel too. Just looking at it, just beautiful artwork. And like you were saying, I did really enjoy this issue, just sort of the walkthrough of, there really isn't a ton of dialogue between people in the issue. It's mostly internal dialogue of Tim, just getting to see what he's thinking and how he struggles with faith and religion like many people do. And even on that first page where he talks about it was easier to be angry, but angry didn't work. But then I prayed and didn't hear anything, so, well, maybe I'll confess my sins. And then I didn't really feel I had some. It's sort of like he's just moving through a process, but he hasn't really got to where he's going yet. And so, sort of like he doesn't even know where he's going. I think that can be true for many people.
Well, life is filled with a lot of periods where I think we all hit that throughout our lives. Many times. And it's not always religious based. It can be based on jobs. It can be based on romance. It can be based on, there's so many different friendships where you hit these periods of turmoil in your life. And that can be sometimes a very short journey, and sometimes it can be a very long journey. And I think that was something that I really loved about, you were saying, you're right, there isn't a whole lot of interactive dialogue between Tim and other people. And I love that, because it's refreshing sometimes to get these pieces where I felt like I really did feel like I was swinging along with him during this issue, which I thought was something that was refreshing. I don't need to see that every issue, and I'm not saying that I do, but it fit totally what the whole point of this was. He was isolated because of this being his trial. So I felt like we were isolated with him. There was no backup. There was no... And that was something that was interesting. He had to make a judgment call on Dick Grayson's decision. Because Dick, as Batman, has said, we are just... And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later as we continue on through the issue. But I thought it was something that was a compelling piece from all this. He went along with what Dick said because Dick was Batman. Even though he didn't agree with it. And I love that he said that. Because that was something to me. I like the distinction that he isn't a drone. He's got his own mind. He may not necessarily agree with the decision, but because of the fact that Dick is the Batman of Gotham City, I almost called him Bruce, but Dick is the Batman of Gotham City, he needs to respect his judgment call on this, and he did. And I thought that was really interesting commentary, because I love that about Tim. He's never been afraid to speak up to Bruce either, as far as when he disagrees with him. He will concede, respecting him, but he also respects him enough to speak his mind. And I like that about the character a great deal. When he's swinging, and that 2-page spread, Judgment on Gotham, I thought that was an absolutely stunning piece.
Yeah.
I love that costume.
This is one of the reasons I was so glad Freddie was on, this title, because I love his artwork when he's dealing with the action sequences, but also just all the background detail that he puts into his work, and just, not only just the look of terror on the faces of the kids in the bus or the cops, just, the little background you see, just start going through all the background details, but there's extra little thing that, it was another thing I caught on a second read-through. The school bus it looks like a busload of Jewish students. Because, you can see the payasses, you can see the yarmulkes, especially on the next page. And I was like, oh my God, throwing in let's add another religion to the story here. I thought that was a cool thing, that one of the buses getting thrown around was, to me, at least I'm taking it that this was, possible school, I can't think of what the technical term for a Jewish school is, but I'm sure.
A private school.
Private school. I know there's a title for it.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, there's a variety of private schools for a variety of religions and purposes like that, so.
Yeah, I thought that was just a nice little touch, and just, you got Crusader in the far back there, just kind of like, just hanging out, and throughout this, you keep seeing him pop up as he's throwing stuff at Tim. This was one of those things I was just so glad to see Freddy back on this book, because this is the kind of stuff that I love seeing him do.
I think Guy Major did a lot of his color work when he was on Robin, back when he was the regular artist on Robin. I'm almost positive.
Yeah.
That he did the color work on there. And it really is a good relationship between the two. What do you guys think of Tim in the Red Robin costume? Like, do you have any desire to see him go back to being Robin, to wear the old Robin suit? Or do you like him as Red Robin now in that outfit? Do you guys have... I'll start with you, Mark. Do you have a preference?
I want him to stay as Red Robin. I wouldn't like it if he went back. Because I think Red Robin shows that he's grown beyond Robin. Not just a sidekick anymore, which as Robin he wasn't. I would say he had grown beyond that too. But I guess I've written about this on the forums once. I don't mind characters changing costumes as long as they don't lose who they are. And it's sort of like we were talking about with Tim Drake Wayne. Like, you could put him in this costume. I think you could put him in the Batman costume or a totally different costume, and he would still be Tim. Whatever costume he's in, he would go by that name. But he's Tim, just like you put Dick Grayson in the Batman costume, and he's still Dick. Mm-hmm. He doesn't try to become Bruce or be the Bruce Wayne Batman. They're still who they are. As long as the writers and the artists keep them as the core of the characters they are, then the costume doesn't matter. But I wouldn't want to see him go back to being Robin, because it would almost seem like a regression or a demotion to me.
Yeah, it's funny how I also wouldn't have wanted to see him become Nightwing. And I'm a lot more comfortable with the concept of Dick Grayson going back to being Nightwing, because that's Dick Grayson's own identity. Like, he evolved into Nightwing. Now, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily looking for Dick Grayson to do that, but if he did, I don't know that I would have an issue with it. But I like Red Robin because... realistically, this is an identity that Tim took on himself and has made his own. Like, this used to be the Kingdom Come Dick Grayson costume, but in this continuity, and it's funny, I identify this now so much more with Tim than I do in any level with a future alternate Earth version of Dick Grayson, because now, with the recent events, we've seen that Kingdom Come is not happening in our universe. So... I love that this costume now is his continuity, it's his future, it's his identity, and you're right, Mark, it shows his growth. What about, Jim, what about you? Do you have desires to see him go back to being... Because, there's not a right or wrong answer to this.
It was funny, up until the one Teen Titans issue we're going to be discussing later, I would be 100% saying, no, let's keep him at Red Robin, and in the exact same reasons you're saying about how this is kind of like the growth and evolution of, Tim Drake. It's his own hero now. He's no longer the sidekick. And I was completely shouting out from the rooftops, all that. But there is a scene in the Teen Titans that got me thinking, could Tim take off, the Red Robin? Could he go back to being Robin? And to be honest with you, I think he could pull it off and not have it look as a demotion, have it, be a change for him, that the Robin costume is, just that his personality is who he is, and it's like the Red Robin he could actually turn it and say Red Robin was the phase, and Robin is who he is. So it's weird kind of mindset where up into literally reading that issue, I always said, no, Red Robin, he's Red Robin. This is his evolution. This is what he'll be as an adult. I was excited and gung-ho for it. But just there's this couple moments in that issue that just have me thinking, Tim could pull it off. Tim could actually become Robin again and not have it be a demotion, not have it be a step down. It could be just part of, him embracing who he actually is.
Do you look at Red Robin as a phase now? Because I see, the way I look at it is, I think we saw the phase end when the Red Robin costume changed. When he went through that arc and we finally saw him embracing the role of Red Robin, and the costume got souped up a little bit. They made it more of like a full tunic and that type of thing versus the the separate pieces of the costume. The look at it is now, the slight alterations to it. I took that as being the end of that kind of dark phase that he went through when he was trying to get everyone to believe that Bruce was alive and he knew it. I look at it now as the phase is over and this is the next step for him. He's in that place now. He's that character you were talking about. Actually, everything you're saying, I agree with everything you're saying about he could have gone back, but I think that would have been the time for him to go back because I think he's at that place now, and I don't think... I guess in many ways I am agreeing with what you're saying. I don't think the suit matters now. I think he's in the place that we need him to be, and I think he is that character, and so I guess I'm not really disagreeing with you as much as saying I think he's already in that place, and I don't think the outfit matters. I think where he is now emotionally, the person that we're seeing in this issue that's so open to being vulnerable and talking about those feelings really works for me.
And let me just clarify. I'm not saying I want to see him do this. Mm-hmm. I like Red Robin. I like what they're doing with him, his mindset, just how he's interacting. There was just a moment in the other issue that got me thinking that he could do it. And it's, they could actually, the correct writer could pull it off and not have it take away anything from Tim. Because I was, in the exact place that everybody else was, where it would be kind of a step down, it would be a step back, and I don't want to see that, and I still don't want to see that. I want him to stay as Red Robin. I like where they're going with this. I like how it is. It is a maturity of Tim, but we're not losing the Tim that was Robin now. We've got that same type of personality in this costume. We've got the Tim that I know, the Tim who's my friend, is now in the Red Robin costume. So I'm happy with this, and I don't want to see the change, but it's always one of those things in the back of my mind. I'm like, he could pull it off. Tim could pull it off.
He's not your friend.
Yes, he is.
No, he just plays along with that, so that way you'll quit bugging him.
Hey, I'm like the fifth Beatle to him. Yeah. I'm that guy. I'm his pal.
He won't even take my calls. So I mean, you're been more of them than I am, but he finds me totally creepy. But you make him uncomfortable.
He lets me, wax the red bird. I can actually do the wax on, wax off. Kind of my little training. To one day, if he needs, to call for backup, he's got my cell phone number, and he's willing to call it.
All right.
Don't shatter the fantasy, okay? Come on.
Guys, back to my question about Dick Grayson before when I was talking about it. Do you agree with Dick going along with this situation? Because basically, the way it's been laid out, they have to stay out of each other's tests. And this is about the salvation of Gotham. Dick's going to go through his trial. Selina, her trial. Tim Drake, right here, we're watching him go through his trial. Do you agree with Dick's decision that they stay out of it and they go through the trials, they jump through the hoops? I guess here was my take on it. I was seeing as I'm asking the question. I like seeing that Tim would prefer to call in help, because that fits Tim Drake, and that's what I like about him. That's the leader of the Titans that we're seeing right now and his relationship there. I do understand Dick's point of view, though, as well. He's Batman. Gotham's his city. Batman has to look like he can handle it in any situation that's thrown at him. While Batman has and uses allies, his intimidation is often driven by his reputation of being able to overcome anything that Gotham villains can come up with, whether they're metahuman or not. So I can see both sides of it. I'm not saying I necessarily fully agree with either situation. I personally like that there's a distinction there and there's a deferral to Batman. But do you guys agree with it? And, Mark, I'll let you have a chance to respond to this first. What were your thoughts when you were hearing that? Did you have a side that you took, or did you... Where were you at?
Well, I'm always the call-in backup. I loved it when Tim called in backup to help when Ra's al Ghul is targeting everybody he knew. and he called in everybody to protect him and he was fighting Ra's al Ghul one-on-one. But you had Superboy and Cassie, and just everybody was protecting somebody, Kid Flash. So I've always liked that. But I do understand what you're saying about Batman not calling and back up. And I think that's a very Gotham thing specifically, is that Gotham always, Batman always wants Gotham to handle their things alone, even all the way back to No Man's Land with not wanting Superman to come in as much. It's just something Gotham needs to do to keep surviving. You don't want to always be relying on outside help. You have to learn how to deal with things yourself. So I think part of it is the city that they're in.
It's funny, you would think, because I'm the call for backup guy, that I'd be all up in arms over this. And when I first saw them jumping through the hoops, I was like, really? And then, and it's, again, just thinking back to, because of who this is, because of what's going on, because of Gotham is in itself its own entity, and the people of Gotham, the heroes of Gotham, have to take care of their own. I didn't have that much of an issue that I thought you would think I normally would have a huge issue with this, but it was funny. One of the things that really kind of got me okay with this wasn't that it wasn't, not calling for backup. It's not calling for outsiders to come in and do their thing. It was still the Gotham heroes, still the people who are involved with this were still getting involved. Tim immediately called in Lonnie and got Lonnie thinking about it. He made a couple phone calls, and they weren't pulling in Superman or the JSA into this because they're outsiders. But Tim was still looking for that, that team concept, looking for his backup, looking for other plans, and already planning just in case, he had his plan B already starting, just in case plan A, where he fails his trial, well, I've got my plan B. I'm going to start looking for other options. And I thought that was a cool way to not call for backup, following Batman's, order, but still going ahead and doing it, and not just counting on just the three of them to solve the problem. They were opening it up to other people, to other Gothamites, to let's solve this together, let's work together.
But not interfering with his trial.
Right.
Which was an interesting, because he stuck to the rules of no backup for my trial. He did his whole trial himself. It was only, like you said, a contingency plan, which I'm with you 110%. I love that he had that little backside contingency plan going while still doing what Batman said. And I get it because of the nature of the Crusader, because that was something that I thought worked really well in this issue, was they put enough creep factor in the Crusader that you just saw that he was the right amount of crazy. Like, that was the artwork to me. This guy, you've got to look at this fella like he's completely nuts. Because, we know as Azrael readers what the Crusader's all about, and that the look on his face that he's got, he did that to himself. That cross that's on his face, that's not something you can pull off or wash off with the right kind of soap. That's permanent. And there is no nose. That's not an artistic mistake. He hurt himself badly, and he's smiling about it. This dude is nuts. It really is like an extreme version of religious fanaticism backed with superpowers. This is a guy that Batman needs a contingency plan for.
Oh, big time. And it's one of the things you look at just, and it's again, talking about the call for backup, where you go with what Tim's going to do here. The next step, when you're looking at a trial, this is a trial of faith, a trial of belief, a trial of character. Do you really want to cheat on a trial of your character, of your personal character, whether you're worthy of being, the city's champion? Do you really want to cheat on it? And that was the other thing I started thinking is he needs to keep the other people out of it, because what does that say about his character if he cheats on it?
But you got to also take it to another level. It's not him versus the Crusader. It's Gotham City versus the Crusader, with him being a representative. There's a huge distinction there. If it was Tim versus the Crusader, call in backup to your blue in the face, or handle it your own way, because the risks on that end. And I'm also going to say that I agree with you as far as what you're talking about character. Whatever decision he makes with regards to his own character and how he's viewed fall on him. He doesn't play ball on this; it falls on Gotham. the citizen, I mean, they're going to destroy the city. Mm-hmm. They're bringing down hellfire and brimstone on the city of Gotham. So there's a huge amount of responsibility for these three to jump through the hoops. Because if they don't, they already know from experience and what they were dealing with in this arc leading up to it. And it is one of the things where I think you needed some of the other pieces, maybe. I think you can figure it out along the way, and Mark was talking about that, you know, how you can kind of figure out along the way, looking through the internet and stuff like that. But I liked this sense of responsibility to the people of Gotham, and that you can't make the judgment call and decision for them, so we do got to jump through the hoops. And I think that responsibility fell solely on Dick Grayson to make that call, to say, hey, wait a minute, this is our city, this is my city, and this is the way we've got to do this. I like that, because it really lends to an interesting debate as far as when do you and when don't you, and why. And I still don't know, in Tim's position, what I would do. You know, and because it goes beyond your own character, because you do have a responsibility to those people. So I don't know, and that might actually lead me more. That might make me more inclined to call for backup.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where you can second guess yourself, or you know, and that's actually part of the thing about the heroes in really modern day heroes, just real life heroes, like, you know, police, fire, you know, military, just the people that you're given this split second to make one call that could affect millions. And okay, what do I do? And you just gotta, you know, either trust in your training, go with your gut, or in Tim's case, he's following the chain of command, but he's not being a blind soldier to it. He's, you know, he's still his individual self, but he is trusting in his superiors.
Okay, I got a question for you guys then. Let's go a different route on it. It's the three of us. Not Dick Grayson, not Catwoman, not Red Robin. It's the three of us in the same situation, in our city, so to speak. And we're in this situation with the Crusader, knowing what the power set is of this guy and what we're dealing with right now. What would you do? Like, how would you handle it? You know, you got to go through your own individual trial. We can't help each other. I know what I know for sure what I would do. I would be calling somebody, not necessarily for backup, as a sounding board to say, okay, and I'm not talking about it even questioning my own strength of character, saying, you know, should I play ball with this or not? What do you think? You know, we're gambling on a whole lot here. It's not just a matter of myself winding up with a bullet over this. What do I do here? I don't know how comfortable I would be making that judgment call on my own. Now, that person could totally convince me pretty easily to say, dude, you got to go through this on your own. You got to do your trial. And I could see myself doing that then and going through in the trial with the right amount of conversation with somebody. But I'm the kind of person that needs a sounding board. Big shock with what we do every week. But I mean, that is, you know, part of my personality is that I like to share ideas and get feedback on them, whether I in the end disagree with the feedback that I'm given or not. But what would you guys do? You don't have to necessarily be in the same place. How would you handle, like, Mark, how do you think you'd handle this if you were in this situation?
Sort of like all three of them doing a trial, or you mean Tim's specific trial that he's going through right now?
You know what? Either or. So I mean, if one's sticking out for you, go either way. Because I think in either case, you could put yourself in the role of Tim and still answer my question, right, as far as saying that. So I don't know. You know, where do you identify with this, and how? What do you think you would do?
I think I would sort of do what Tim is doing, where you go through the trial, but you're making a contingency plan on the way. Because reading this and listening to Tim's thoughts, it sort of seems like he knows they've set this trial up where he can't win. There's like going to be something in it that's going to keep him from winning in the end. So he's trying to set something up. Like, you don't want to be so blatant that you just throw the trial aside, because then unless you take these people out, you know that they could destroy the whole city. But you want to have some sort of backup plan in case you fail, that you have people coming in who could help save the city. So as Tim, that's what I think I would do, is sort of try to secretly build up a contingency plan while making them think you're playing by their rules at the same time. I think that would be your best shot versus just calling in everybody at once. So that's what I would do if I was Tim.
Which shows his maturity and experience, too. And that was something that I really loved about this issue, because I agree with you. I think it was a very smart way to play it. He wasn't, he was playing the game, but not putting all his eggs in one basket. That was good. What would you do, Jim?
I would be looking at Metropolis, going, you know, that's a pretty good town to move to.
What about the citizens of Gotham, though? Because you kind of have to do your trial. Well, you've got Gotham's blown off the map, and there's Jim. He's at a restaurant in Metropolis, watching it on the big screen.
I tell people to run as I'm going. As you see me swinging out of town, I'm like, dude, run! Here, I will lead you out of here. I'll be in the front, kind of guiding you away from the city.
I know you're joking around, but in all honesty, let's actually talk about that. Do you think that is an option for people of Gotham? Would they be able to leave?
A city the size of Gotham, if everyone were to do a mass exodus, it would do more damage than
right.
Yeah, granted, some people would get out. The people who are at the front of the line would survive. The people in the middle of that line would be trampled to death. Yeah. And you would actually cause more panic in in having people evacuate in such a short notice. Now, if they had some time to prepare, then you get them out. But, when you get that sudden boom, here is an apocalypse, bam, here is this natural disaster, the people who are trying to flee do cause more damage to themselves and to those around them than sometimes the actual disaster itself. So if I was sitting in Tim's boot, in his boots here, I would probably, and I'd like to say I would do what Tim's doing here with setting up the contingency plan, and I do follow the chain of command well enough that if my Batman were telling me, hey, we got to do this on our own, I'm like, okay, I'll do this on my own, but just the setting up the contingency for the failure, just in case something happens. I like that mindset, and I'd like to think I was that forward-thinking, but in a way, I'm sometimes very blocked in on my mindset and what I'm doing, and if I get in the zone and I get very focused on one item, I don't look around me, and I don't think of plan B or plan C, and it's, I can sometimes get so single-minded that I could run the risk of something like this, especially this serious of a trial. I could be so focused on just solving the trial that thinking, I can do this, I gotta save it, it's on my shoulders, I'm not gonna let the city down. And then when I fail in the end, I'll be like, oh, and that's, for me, is the failure is, how I deal with the failure is my big personal flaw, and that would be my weakness in this. So that's another thing where I'm reading this and seeing how Tim's handling it. I'm just like, damn, he's doing it right. This is cool. This is a good guy, and I don't think I would handle it as well as he does.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about him saving the police car and the taxi and the bus was how fluid that looked artistically. Mm-hmm. Because it looked to me like it was in motion sequence. You see him reaching behind his belt, behind the cape, pulling it out. I could almost see, like in my head, the full motions going through where he's pulling this thing up. That thing's firing. And he's flawlessly pinning all three of those things to buildings so they won't land on the ground and kill everybody inside. Just such a great visual moment of, and while he's doing this, what's on his mind? He's debating this whole Mayor Haiti thing. I loved the way that whole sequence played out with the dialogue matching the fluid motion. It looked beautiful. The action was fantastic. I'm like, oh, so cool. And that cape, kicks into this glider mode, and just everything about that just made me want to be Red Robin in those moments. The right amount of realism where you're like, okay, that could exist, and somebody really could train themselves to do that, yet you just know that, like, it's skirting that line. That's something comics are really good at, and I love that, because it's a very James Bondy kind of thing that, like, and we see it later with the whole bomb thing that he throws out too, which we'll talk about when we get to it. But I loved the use of gadgets in this to give him a little bit of an edge, so he's able to save people's lives while completing his tasks, and that was neat to me.
What I like about it is that the whole action scene's going on, but you also get to see he's thinking the whole time, and he doesn't even have to think about what he's doing. Like you said, he's so well trained. He's swinging through the air, and there's a bus, a cop car, and a taxi, and he knows exactly what to pull out, exactly where to shoot it. And the whole time, he's going through his head what the whole test is, what he needs to do, talking about who the mayor is. Because if I was swinging through there, I'd be like, okay, there's a bus, there's, what do I have to do, what tool do I need? But it's almost effortless, I would say.
Well, because a moral and ethical trap's been sprung, as well as an action situation, because this is a trap that Ra's al Ghul has sprung on the city. It's one of the underlying tones of this piece is that he knows these heroes at their core, Ra's al Ghul, I mean. So he's really, and thinking back to stories like Tower of Babel and stuff like that, where Ra's al Ghul was involved, we're seeing a character who he knows where they're doomed to fail and why, because of how well he's studied his adversaries. And I love thinking villains like that. I don't want all the villains to be cookie cutter and operate that way. I like that he feels different because he does operate this way. This is when he's at his best, well thought out plans that slowly build over time and come to a head like this in a big way. This is something that built. It wasn't just dropped on them. They built this. And going back to Tim's test, he knows Mayor Haiti's corrupt. How far would you go to save someone you have encountered personally and know is morally messed up at the core? Could you make that decision to do what's right? And that's what I loved about the use of his inner dialogue. It impresses me more when we see our hero work through ethical dilemmas in situations where they're doing something completely different. And I think these are messages that we all take with us when we have to deal with our own moral issues, because we're all faced with this kind of, not like this level, but I mean, we're all faced with moral and ethical issues on a daily basis. And we know it's okay to be conflicted by all that, but in the end, you make the right choice. It's a great message from comics, but what would you do in a situation like this? You know the mayor's corrupt.
That's a toughie, because it's, again, I look at like this real life situation where I'm in, where right now, Cuyahoga County, where Sean and I live, there's a lot of corruption going on in the various government agencies and the various representatives and councilmen, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And I can sit there and like, what if one of them was trapped in a burning building? Would I run in and save them? Would I call 911? Yeah, sure, I'd do that. That's no effort on my part, and it's a good thing to do. But would I take that risk? Would I physically put myself in harm's way to save one of these people who, you see and is a crook, and it's beyond a crook? And I'd like to think that I'm a good enough person that I would actually, do that, but I don't think I would. And it's just it's just who I am, where if I know someone is just really a nasty person, I don't know if I would physically put myself in harm's way to save that person. Now, if it would take like no effort or there would be no harm to me, yeah, I would do something. Like if someone had started having a heart attack and I was right there, yeah, I'd do CPR, I would do mouth to mouth, I would do that whole and try to keep them alive, or basic first aid kind of that. I would do that. But Tim is putting himself in direct harm's way, and that to me is that's the statement and definition of the hero.
Well, what about you, Mark?
It would be difficult, I think, but I think what you're looking at here is, Tim doesn't save people because of who they are. He saves people because of who he is.
Yeah.
So he's going to do what's right. And I think, a lot of times it comes down to that with people. I know, like, police and firefighters and paramedics and stuff, they do their job because it's who they are, not because of the person, who's in trouble, who needs help. But heroes will do what they do because of who they are, not just because of, this person's a good person and deserves to be saved, this person's a bad person. And I think most people do that you do what you do because of who you are. And I think they've even done studies of people when they leave a tip at a restaurant. It really doesn't matter what the service was like. They're going to leave a tip because it says more about who they are than about the service they received. So I like the fact that Tim isn't just going to sacrifice the mayor even though he's corrupt, because then that would really say something about Tim that I wouldn't think is true of Tim, having read him through the years.
And I actually agree with Mark, and I actually think, Jim, I'll defend you on this. You got to remember, too, if you were wearing a costume where you were a symbol in your city, and you worked so hard to create that kind of message from your symbol that you put in the city, whether it's Bridgeman or something else. No, I'm taking all the joking out of it. I know you well enough to know, in that situation when the chips are down, you would do the right thing. Now, afterwards, we'd have a lot of discussions. You'd be like, can you believe I had to save that guy? And I think that's where, I think we would all wrestle with that. I agree 100% with every comment you made, Jim, because I think that would be the wrestling that you would go. And we see Tim going through just what you said. Tim's questioning that the same way you did. You're actually really in his place when you're having your commentary there, where in the end he's looking at, I'm being tested. It's an ethical, moral issue. I know what this guy is. Can I save him? Would I save him? Should I save him? And he's in that place where, like you're saying, give him, I guess I'd give him CPR and stuff like that, but when it comes down to it, and you're actually in that moment with knowing the Crusader and Azrael and what they're doing and all that, you almost have to. And I think you would.
As I said, I'd like to think I would, but I don't know. And it's one of those moments where you don't know how you're going to react until the moment. And it's funny as we.
I know you would. No, you know what? I'm gonna answer that as your friend, knowing you like I know you. You would. Yeah. When the chips are down, I could see you very much so being
later. Well, it's funny as we're talking. I didn't even think of this story until just now. I remember one of my friends, cop who, a great guy, and he and I one day were just talking about just like I was sitting there and I was telling him I understand, I kind of understand how. While I don't understand how hard the job is, I was having some moments where dealing with these dealing with some really scummy people, and I couldn't come out and say you're scum. I had to actually kind of make them think I was on their side and I was actually their friend, and I'm trying to help them out. Why don't you just come on, tell me what you did, and we'll work together. It was just, and I felt kind of like scummy about it. And I was talking about it, and he just looked at me. He goes, he had to pull off a father who was beating up the guy who, a pedophile. And he said he hated the fact that he had to jump in there, pull this guy off of it. And it was one of those moments where you like to think, oh, just call it justice. He's like, he couldn't do it. He had to stop that guy. And then he had to, and he felt terrible because, he understood what this father was going through. He understood, and he's like, if I had been a father, I would, if that had been my kid, I would have wanted to do the exact same thing. But there's those moments in time when you gotta do what you gotta do. It's part of who you are. It's part of the job. And it's that, and Tim, it's the same kind of definition with Tim. There is the thing the heroes have to do. And it's funny, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about the conversation and just everything that I had to face when I had to, some dealings with that. So it was wow.
It's a very deep moral. See, I love this in comics. This is something you get out of comics that, to me, is there any question of the legitimacy of comics? No. Not when you can have these type of conversations morally and ethically. This is literature. Right? That's when you're having this type of deep conversation, very much so, because I think we're all wrestling with this situation emotionally, just talking about it. And how cool is that? To really have this situation where we're looking at this character of Tim and saying, wow, is he reacting realistically to this?
I love the artwork on the page where you see the bus and the taxi and the car on the wire, that the bus actually hits the ground.
Oh, and you actually see it on the front hood?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that he saved them, but, it's not exactly perfect where there could still be some injuries. But you would want to stop and make sure they're okay, but he has to keep going because of the very next panel, I'm not willing to sacrifice Haiti either, And then you see the Crusader, and that guy is just a maniac, And with the panel above that, where he's talking about saving Haiti, where the Crusader's in the background, does that remind you all at all of the way sometimes they draw Superman up in the sky? Or?
Oh, yeah, I get that kind of. You know what I think, and the reason why it looks that way, Superman a lot of times when he has that pose there, he has like a confidence. When he's standing there, I don't mean it in a pompous sense. There's nothing wrong with having confidence. One of the things I like about Superman is there's times where he looks very heroic when he's surveying things. Usually when he's in that position, he's surveying things to try and check and see if there's anything going on and that type of thing. Now, this is a twisted version of that, where this guy's surveying things in a confident way because he's confidently judging Gotham. So it's funny how you're saying that. I did not, until you mentioned it now, get a Superman pose out of him until you said that. But now that you said it, I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh, I get, this is definitely a wicked, noseless Superman.
Yeah. It just makes me glad that Superman's one of the good guys because, he could really do some damage. And you could see why some people might be afraid of someone with Superman's powers when you see a guy just as powerful as Crusader sitting there. you wouldn't want to run towards that guy. You want to get as far away as possible.
Yeah, every day I'm glad I don't have the powers of Superman, because I'd be worried I'd do the turn.
I was really glad to see in this issue the reference, it's very quick, to the Prodigy and what Dick Grayson's going through, how he's going through his own moral dilemma, that he was faced with the fact that in his past he may have been a part of this guy, the Prodigy from Haley's Circus, getting beat up. Now, you don't need to know that for this issue. It was a nice little reference point if you had read the issue involving the Prodigy and knew where that storyline was going. I was actually glad in the way that they handled it in the sense that it's vague enough because it doesn't apply to this story. Red Robin readers don't need a lot of confusion being leveled at that. It was just on the screens. We see that Dick Grayson's looking at it. There's a reference to why is Dick Grayson going along with all this. And it's kind of a wink and nod to those of us who know about the Prodigy. But if you don't know, there's not a lot of exposition on it, I guess is what I'm saying. And I really appreciated that handling of pacing, recognizing that there may be people reading this who don't read the rest of it. And you don't want to overly bog them down because it doesn't apply to Tim's trial at all, other than just as a quick reference point to Tim's inner dialogue, and you got to move along. I just thought that was very well handled. And it was a great chance to see Freddie draw Dick Grayson's Batman. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
I think, for me, not having read the issue before this, it also helps put you in the mindset of Tim, of just questioning what Dick is doing sitting there. So, because he's going along with Dick, but he's questioning him at the same time. And I think as the reader, not reading that, it even helps you relate to Tim more, because you're wondering, why is he just sitting there staring at, what's he doing? What's he doing while Tim's doing all this? And it sort of helps you relate to Tim even more, I think.
And Dick Grayson didn't tell Tim. So Tim does not know about what Dick's experience was. He doesn't know about the whole Prodigy thing and that he's been faced with that. As a reader of Red Robin, where you're saying I was questioning him that way, you actually are totally in the same position that Tim's in. That's what I thought was brilliant about the writing of that, was it doesn't ruin the experience for a reader of Red Robin because you know what Tim does. So if you choose not to pursue that any further, at the end of this, you know what Tim does. And I think as a Red Robin reader, that's what you need to know. You need to be on board with Tim. There's nothing that a Tim Drake reader needs to know further than what they've been given in this issue. And that's a hard balance to make, and it was something I really appreciated. I noticed I paid more attention to this in my later read-throughs just because the question came up about, with this being a crossover, was enough information given to Red Robin readers? And I think this is an example of where it was. Yeah, because if you'd gone too much into it there, you're really going to screw with somebody who's reading Red Robin. If you give enough there that you understand why Tim's questioning him, then it's perfect. Because you can either then as a reader go, okay, I want to know what's going on with Dick, or it's enough for me to know that Tim questioned him and let me just move along. Yeah. And that's really all you need to do at this point, because then you're still in his perspective and you're following your character. Anarchy. I want to talk about this a little bit. I like that Tim has found a way to make alliances with some tricky allies, because this is a former villain that he used to go up against. But it's in order to make himself more effective. I think he always has to be on guard with some of these allies that he makes, because I made allies with assassins and things like that along the way, but they're allies that he's made strategic moves to make alliances with and to have them operate under his parameters. And I always think he does it with one eye on them at all times, knowing that there's a point in time where things can kind of turn, but they have helped him in many ways to get through situations he wouldn't have been able to otherwise, where he was very alone. And I like that this little network's been created, because I think it is making him, why do we need a Red Robin book when we've got all these Batman titles, and you've got a Batgirl title, and you've got a Batwoman title? Because Tim operates just a little bit differently. And I think this situation with Anarchy is a great example of something that Tim would do that I'm not so sure the other two would be doing as comfortably.
Right. Well, you look at, they're comfortable with someone like Barbara. They're comfortable with Oracle. They're comfortable with those, people, but just embracing what was a former villain, no. And I can see, again, this is a Tim-ism. This is kind of his mindset and the way he's looking at it. It's not just, he's not throwing caution into the wind, but there is a little bit of a gamble. There is a little bit of a test, but he's counting on his own opinions, his own deductive skills, and his own assessment of, anarchy that, he's going to look for the best course of action overall. It's not, he's not dealing with someone like the Joker, say. He is dealing with someone who has their feet a little bit more on solid ground.
One of the things I really liked in this, with all the destruction, death, danger being brought into Gotham, Tim asks the age-old religious question, how could God allow this? It's often tough when you try and head down the path of the straight and narrow. You do as much good as Tim has done. To not be faced with questioning the concept of God or a God or, what those God or gods, whatever you believe in, stands for. I also like that he questions the way Azrael and the Crusader interpret God's wishes. Because there's a real interpretation issue there. Faith is not something that is always spelled out, and anyone who uses faith as a justification for horrible actions needs to beware that they could be drastically misinterpreting their role. He asks some very human questions that I think can connect with a great deal of readers, no matter what their beliefs are. So even if you don't believe the same things that are being presented in this series, I think you can connect with that concept if you've ever explored religious beliefs on any level. I always loved that Azrael was not afraid to tread into some in some very controversial areas. I like that, going into some religious ground. Yet, I know it's completely story-driven and serves a major purpose to develop the character's world. Putting Tim in that world, like I said, has really made me feel like I'm having a conversation with him again. And I think the writing on this issue is superb. And there's just some moments where Tim's like asking, how could a God allow this? Because this is a guy who, Tim's like, with everything that's happened to me, my friends, family, people dying around me that I'm close to, all the good I've done, what is the point? Why are you doing this? And I think that moral question, seeing that from him, it just offers us a different snapshot of that world. It was something I liked.
It's, when you look at just as he's going through this trial and just everything that, even at the end there, when he finally gets into the church, what's Tim's first goal? His first goal is to get the priest, get the innocents out of there. Rule number one for any hero: protect the innocent. And I'd love seeing him handle that with the burning, church there, goes in, gets the people out of there. Uses that underground tunnel. It basically exposes some bad equipment, but okay, got to deal with that, and then come back and deal with that later.
Even before that, though, and we don't want to skip this, because it goes back to what Mark said before, flawlessly, while he's thinking of all these other things, like questioning God, morality, and not only is he doing that, on the fly he's setting up with Lonnie, the Lane family member, coming in to hopefully, if this all blows up in their faces, to hopefully reason with Azrael. He's also taking care of this blimp that's going down using the water tower, which I loved that bit. And to tell you how much I loved it, not only was I thinking about how cool the gadget was, that bazooka thing that he fired at, the water tower to make it go down, and that it was bringing down water on the whole area, I'm thinking about the collateral damage of that, saying, first of all, I totally agree that he did the right thing, but gee, when there's superhero battles, it causes the taxpayers a lot of money, and he honestly was saving a lot of lives, and everything he did was right, so I'm not one of those that are like saying, well, geez, he shouldn't have done that. I love this because I'm enjoying books like JSA right now where they're really exploring collateral damage, and I'm paying attention to the collateral damage of this going, he just destroyed that water tower, they're going to put that back up.
Well, to me that looked like the gun that they had in the Dark Knight movie when Bruce was over in Japan and he blew out the windows of that one big tower. Because when it hits the squelch, kind of the liquid bomb with the timer, that really looked to me like they kind of took the thing out of the movie there and threw it into the comic. I thought that was kind of cool.
Blid.
Yep.
How would you like to be the lady who received the phone call, though? You answer the phone and somebody tells you, you're probably watching TV or whatever, seeing all Gotham burning. They tell you it's one of your family members' fault, and you're going to have to stop them, save Gotham. I mean, that'd be a pretty weird phone call, I think.
But not only that, I'm totally building off of what you're saying, because I agree with you. How about this? He's judging the city, and we're going to fail, which means you're going to be responsible for saving Gotham, and your pizza will be there in 10 minutes.
See, now, if I was her, then I definitely would be looking at, hey, Metropolis isn't that bad. Let me get out of here. I'm getting a heads up from Robin here to skedaddle out of town, grab the kids, and go.
And this is his brother's wife, right?
Yeah.
Is this the one?
Yeah.
Yeah. The one that, who, he always had a thing for? Isn't that who this is?
Yeah.
So, how much more can she take?
Well, it's the brother's wife, and she killed her brother. She killed his brother. Sorry.
Yeah, her husband. Right.
Yeah. So it's even adds on a whole other layer of guilt that she's feeling.
Which wasn't her fault, but she was used as a tool. Yeah, boy, it's a very complicated world being in Azrael. Azrael's a little more trouble than he's worth.
Now, question for you guys.
Okay.
Now, when we get that, as I said, we get that cool church scene when he gets all the people out, and Tim has that moment with the priest, where the priest is like, thank God you came when you did. Thank him for the Crusaders' faith while you're at it. Just that kind of little dig there, and even Tim later on in his inner dialogue says that was unnecessary. And you kind of, that moment between the two of them, for me, that was like a kind of moment where you can really see Tim is losing his patience. Tim is pushed to the edge. He says
that, too.
Yeah. He's really pushed to the edge, because normally Tim wouldn't throw out the little barb like that. He wouldn't, kind of snap. And I'd love seeing that again as something at the very end of all this craziness he's been going through. Again, another human moment.
Well, and we see it build to that, Jim, because earlier on, right in that bit where I was talking about with the water tower coming down, he says things like, how can my actions over 1 hour compare to those of an entire lifetime? I agree with this. I do think we are and should be judged as a whole. Sometimes mistakes even that we make. I'm not saying Tim made mistakes, but I'm saying make us better people. In Tim's case, most of his life has been serving Gotham and the greater good. So, dude, at some point in time, hasn't he been judged enough already and found, that he is, what right does this Crusader have now to be shoving swords in him, or having Azrael shove swords in him to check and see if he's on the up and up? I think he's determined that. And I love that Tim questions that. Mm-hmm. So I understand his lack of patience, and I like that it built over time during his trial. And I also like, though, that the good person that he is, he caught himself. I shouldn't have said that to the priest. That was really his inner dialogue at that point. I really liked that about him.
Oh, yeah, big time. I would have snapped earlier.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the sword test. Do you think that Tim passed the sword test, and you see Michael ready right away to say, you spared Gotham, and if it wasn't for the Crusaders saying no, this would have been over and done with. Do you think Michael Azrael, I'm talking about, was relieved at that point? Happy at that point? To have found somebody who finally, because he's quick to say, Gotham spared.
Yeah. Oh, definitely think he was looking for, he was looking for the trial to be over. He was looking for it to be ended. And he, because inside him, there is still that good guy. There is that honest, honorable cop inside there who wants to do good, who wants to do right. And he's looking for the righteous. He's looking for that. Now, he's got sometime a weird way to find it and a weird approach towards it, but he is inside there. There is that good guy in him. So I think he was happy, and he was kind of like ecstatic. Cool, the trial's done. He passed. And when you get Crusader coming in, I was like, oh, come on, that's bull. That's a little tweak to it. Come on, I think he passed.
Crusader's the party pooper.
Not only that, and when you see the reason that he fails, where the Crusader comes in and the whole thing was the way he entered the church, and just how sometimes in different religions people can be so legalistic, they miss the whole point of what the religion is about. And I think you can see that with the Crusader. A guy who quotes Bible verses, but he's burning down a whole city, throwing buses of school children in the air. So it's just interesting to me looking at that. But I think Azrael was relieved that Tim had passed his test. Even the fact that, after the Crusader accuses him of failing, he even gives Tim a chance to answer to whether he has faith or not. He just doesn't take the Crusader's word for it. I think he wants them to succeed. And he even says he's sorry for Gotham, but sorry for you. I think he wants them to succeed, but he's going by the test whether, not just what he feels.
This leads to an interesting question. Because the Crusader, those justifications are because he doesn't believe. Now, does faith make you a better person? Can you be a good person without belief? I think so. You know, I'm a Catholic. I love my religion, but I don't believe that someone is a doomed person because they're not Catholic. I've never been a fan of that. And I know, there's people in a variety of different religions and all that. There's different sects and things that, tend to believe, if you're not this, if you don't believe this, you're doomed and you're damned and all that. I believe faith is faith. We can all be right. We can all be wrong on some level. It could be crazy because some little blue man that's like in charge of everything. While I do believe in my religion and I, was raised that way, I went to Catholic school as a kid and all that, I'm not an exclusionist in the sense that, I believe good people are good people. No matter what their beliefs are, non-beliefs, if somebody just totally doesn't believe in religion, I don't think that makes them a bad person. So it was interesting when I read this, I'm like, well, this really answered for myself a lot of questions about me and what I believe, because I found myself questioning the Crusader. And I'm sitting here, well, like, this guy who just came in here and did all these things and saved the mayor, got shoved through with your swords, was found just fine. You're now going to say he took 2 swords through him, and because he didn't genuflect on the way in, and, he doesn't believe, we're going to sit there and say that he's not worthy? Baloney! And that was something where, for me, I'm like, wow, this really says a lot to me about what my own personal faith is. I do believe good actions lead to good karma and all that. And I thought that was something that I found interesting. What do you guys believe? Do you believe that faith, and I'm not asking you to, like, sit there, to identify religions and all that, but I'm just saying, do you believe that faith makes a good person, or just being a good person makes a good person? Where do you go on that? I don't know if Mark or Jim, which one of you wants to go first on that, because it's a tricky topic.
It is a tricky topic, and when I look just at my life, my experiences, one of the nicest people I've ever met was an atheist. 100% did not believe in any supreme being, did not believe in anything, believed that once we die, that's it. There's no afterlife. There's no nothing beyond, this shell. And they were just this wonderful person who treated everyone the way they wanted to be treated. They were peaceful, kind, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking now, with my personal faith and my personal belief, I'm like, there's no way in my mind that this person, when they die, they're going to go on to, to hell. Because this is a wonderful person, who's done so much great things for people, yet when you look at the Catholic faith, that's what's going to happen. That's what they're destined for because of the fact that they didn't have that belief. They didn't have that faith. So it's moments like that that do kind of make me question whether what is faith, what is right, what is wrong. And, it's issues like this where, where Tim he's given the ultimate test where if I lie, and tell them I have faith and I've truly actually failed the test. But if I tell them the truth, I've failed. What's the correct thing to do? And he goes with the truth, which so much, and he even has the line, so much for the truth will set you free. So it's a tough call to make. And for me personally, I say faith doesn't make you a good person. Faith helps you be a good person. There's a lot of times when I've wanted to do the easy way and I've wanted to do the wrong thing, but it is my faith. It is that just, my upbringing, my, what my beliefs are that have kept me on the path, that have kept me on the straight and narrow, that have kept me doing the correct thing, which sometimes is harder. It's, sometimes it's the tough road to go, and I go that way because of what I believe and because of my faith, and along the way, along that tough journey, my faith will give me strength to push through it. So instead of giving up and just laying down saying, it's over and done with, I can actually pull strength from, my beliefs and where I know what's going to happen in the beyond.
What about you, Mark?
Well, it's an interesting question. I'm actually a seminary student right now.
Oh, cool.
So when you talk about faith and about good people, there's always some questions that I have to ask, like one of which is who gets to judge what is good? And then it depends what you have faith in. And it's one thing that I've heard a couple of people say lately. It's not religion that saves you. I think there are a lot of people looking for religion to save them. But it would be God that saves you. He's the one that gives you the faith. And, there are a lot of people who don't believe in God, who, don't believe in Jesus Christ or any religion of any sort. And by all earthly standards, they would be considered good people. And they're probably a lot better than a lot of people who would claim to be religious. So my answer would be, if the faith is given to you by God through Jesus Christ, it's going to make you a good person because it's going to make you more like Jesus. If faith is something you are trying to drum up within yourself and follow a set of rules, it's going to make you legalistic and probably not much fun to be around. So I think that would be my answer.
See, and actually it's funny, I've had to think about this for myself with my own faith. Because I still believe the same things that I believed going to Catholic school through all the years and all that. It hasn't really... I think my beliefs have evolved, which I think they should, in the sense that, I think if you follow your faith as a drone, you never really have faith. It's just, you're just kind of going through the motions and you never really connect with it. And it's funny how with my own personal faith, I've kind of gone through... especially in recent years, my mother's gone through breast cancer multiple times. So I've had periods where I've had to question, what is my own connection with faith? How much do I believe and what do I believe? And I've come to the conclusion that I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Mark, in the sense that, if you believe in this concept that God is the one that ultimately gives you your faith and helps to make those decisions and things like that, I also believe that for these people that are good people that maybe didn't go down that path, that God has a plan for them, and that they're not... I don't believe that they're quote-unquote, damned. And I mean, I don't know how much we really want to go crazy into this, but I never have been a big fan of that concept where people will look at people and go, well, because you don't practice this, you're going to go to hell, or you're going to go here, or something like that. I believe that if people are good people, and if you believe in the concept that a benevolent God would make good people on this planet and help guide them in that direction, maybe they never were able to voice that it was God that led them that way or that wasn't their path. But I can't sit there and look at them and go, well, because you're an atheist or because you're this, I believe that God creates good people and you're not created by God, you're not, a follower of whatever because you're an atheist. I can't do that. I can't, alienate people because of their beliefs if they're different than mine, just because I think that to me is a contradiction of what is good when you do that. So I think you have to be open-minded to them seeing things differently, but still being, in essence, good. And we could probably debate this whole thing for hours, because it really is a big can of worms to open and do that. But I think it was something that I found that was inspirational about this issue, was it really made me question what is good and what is faith. And I think they can be two things that are separate. I think they can be two things that are connected. I think faith, if you don't understand it, can lead you down a bad path. Oh, yeah. If you don't understand it and you don't really, consider what it means. But I also think it can lead you down a good path as well. But I don't think you have to have faith to be, at the core, a good person.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I believe you can be. It's who you are is the definition of whether you're good. I think the power of good, the concept of what is good is stronger than the concept of what is evil. For me, an evil action needs to be compared to a good action. The fact that, it is just one thing, boom, doesn't.
And Mark was asking me a good question. What was your original question? I don't know how to even go back to the original question at this point, other than to say that I think the original question, is faith alone make you a good person, or can you be a good person if you don't believe the same things as somebody else? And I guess I don't know, how you feel. I don't know that there's a set single answer for this, which is why I thought it was an interesting question, because I don't know that there is one answer. You might view it differently than me and Jim. I might view it one way, and Mark, you might view it another. So I guess I don't know if there's anything else you want to say on it. I meant to throw it back to you, so I apologize.
No, I did have two questions that I thought of, though, just reading. One of them I thought of just reading comics in general. In comics, there does seem to be a concept of God. I mean, isn't the Spectre an agent of God or something like that? Is that right? Or
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, he's the guy. He's God's spirit of vengeance.
Yeah. So the one thought I had thought of, though, and this is sort of just coming from my perspective, is it seems there's a God in comics, but do you all remember anywhere in comics that ever talks about, in just sort of the comic book world or spectrum, was Jesus ever alive or something? Does that make sense?
I think there's some allusion to characters like the Huntress being Huntress, I guess I've always taken as being Catholic. Well, she wears a cross.
Yeah, she's Roman
So, but the
Catholic.
second you're wearing a cross, we know that she's Catholic. So, yeah, I would guess in her case...
Well, you're talking like Jesus as an actual character interacting with people?
Well, not necessarily interacting, but a lot of the times when they reference religion or God in a comic, it's always about God, but then I guess coming just, from a Christian background, God made a way for people to relate with him through Christ. And a lot of times in comics, it seems like God would almost be more of the agnostic God, where he set things in order and let it go. So it doesn't seem there's any way. It seems like when God or people who in comics are acting on behalf of God, that God is more of almost a judgmental, very far away God. And I was just wondering, and a part of that is a lot of superheroes seem to be a Christ-type character. Like Superman, you could say, is a very Christ-type character. And other characters that, because they sacrifice, they give up, and they do stuff for the good of others and to save other people. And so I was just wondering, what your all's thoughts were on that.
I think my thought has always been that I think there's certain characters that I relate to as being Catholic, because like the Huntress is the first example that I go to right away, because we sit here with a cross and all that. I don't remember reading any like DC comics where they went heavily into the concept of Christ. And I think part of the reason why is I think you want to, as writers, when you use religion, you want to strike a careful balance of not trying to come across as promoting one kind of religion, but being accessible to, like, religious dialogue. Like, I thought this issue was great because I think we're obviously having a conversation based on our own religious backgrounds here when we're doing that, and we're connecting with this story in a certain way based on our own religious backgrounds, and we're looking at the concept of God in this story in certain ways based on our religious backgrounds. Like, you've already started to define what God looks like in the DC universe based on your own background and how you're viewing it because of that. And I like that about the story, because I think somebody of a different religious faith could view this story differently based on their own religious background, if that makes sense. And I actually prefer that, because I like the idea that a comic book story isn't afraid to touch on religious issues, but I also don't want it to become too preachy where it's saying, like, you need to believe this or you need to believe that. At the end of this, I didn't really feel like I was being told what my faith should be, but I was questioning the concept of faith personally and relating it to my own concept of faith. And I don't know if you guys had that experience, and I guess that's all I can share is mine. For me, I was thinking about faith personally, and I didn't feel like I had to, like, look from the outside at a different religion. I was thinking about my own and relating it to this. And I don't know I know I'm not really answering your question, Mark, directly. I don't remember there being like a Christ concept. I don't remember like this being a certain set religion in the DC universe. Like, I felt it was a certain kind. And I think they tend to avoid that to keep it more open-ended. But I don't know. Do you agree with me, Jim? Do you?
They do keep it very open-ended with the concept of God. Now, Superman for Tomorrow, they had more when he was dealing with that priest.
Oh, yeah,
there was a lot of references to Jesus in that one, and actually it was a lot of references with Superman being a Christ-like figure. So I think you do get moments where they put it out there, but I think as a general concept, comics try to keep it general just because I don't think they don't want to alienate any readers.
And For Tomorrow was really directly hit on what Mark just said, where a lot of these heroes sometimes look like a Christ-like figure. The priest was looking to him and asking, because he was having like a crisis of faith at that time, and was looking at Superman and saying, "Are you, a god? Are you this type of person?" And I really like that Superman responded, "No," and really was, having that deep down to earth discussion, and it took a lot of that and brought it down to more of an earthly level, saying that no, even though I've got these powers, I'm not. And I thought that was an interesting exploration there, but that's one of those rare times that I remember that. I don't remember feeling like there was a Christ-like concept in the DC universe, and I don't know if I feel that like that's something that I want them to heavily explore. I mean, I guess if a writer had a good story, For Tomorrow is a great example where it worked really well, I would have no issue with it. So I'm not saying I don't want them to explore it. I'm not saying that but I don't feel like the need that they have to either. I kind of like it being open like this to interpretation, because I'm more of a fan of that in literature, where you can connect with the literature in your own personal way without it getting in the way of whatever your beliefs are or aren't, if that makes sense. But I don't know. Mark, do you have anything you want to add to that, or anything you're feeling about that? Or
it was just a thought I had on it, just because I've sort of had the thought, just in my experience reading comics, which is really only about 5 or 6 years, well, I guess college, maybe 7 or 8 years now, but that there is a God, but I would phrase it as there is a God, but there's never a Jesus Christ. Just the way I read it. And it doesn't affect my reading of comics because I still like and relate to the characters, but I just thought it was something interesting. And then the other question I had would be sort of go back to where Tim talks about just the suffering he's been through, the people he's lost. And as suffering is always a bad thing, we never want anybody close to us to suffer. We don't want to suffer ourselves. But do you think Tim would be the same person in the comics today if he hadn't suffered the way he had? Like, does suffering play a role in life to make us stronger and form us to who we're supposed to be, even though it's very unpleasant? And I mean, just sometimes it can scar you, but I guess it's the thing is you never want to suffer, but does it help you grow, I guess would be the question.
Jim?
The one thought that always pops in my head whenever I think about this stuff, especially even with Batman and Dick Grayson, all of the various members of the Bat family, is that which does not kill you only serves to make you stronger. And these characters are forged all from this loss. And even you look at Barbara Gordon. She was Batgirl. She had this great life, and then she gets paralyzed by the Joker. And she takes it to another level where she becomes Oracle, and she becomes this, entity that is helping out other heroes and making the world a better place. So there is a lot of the tragedy does forge these heroes, and it does give them that motivation. We talk about how we would want to think we would be that good, we would be able to do that stuff, but you just look at the level of discipline that all these people have had to obtain just to do half of the stuff they do, and you have to have that drive, that motivation behind it. Now, I'm a good person. I like to think I like taking down the bad guys, but there's a level of physical training I'm willing to put myself through that these guys completely surpassed. And part of that is that pain they felt, that I never want another living soul to go through what I've gone through. So I'm going to push it. So whenever they get to that point of being exhaustion, they get to that point of being tired, they remember that pain, they remember how they felt, and it pushes them beyond. So I think pain, suffering, all that really is a strong initial building block of who they are.
But I think he's talking about in general, not just in comics, right, Mark? Am I reading you right?
Well, I mean, specifically in the case of Tim, because I think it's a very human. I mean, you can relate it to humanity because anytime I suffer or people I know suffer, the question that is always asked is sort of why? Why do I have to go through this? Sort of what Tim, was saying about his lifetime of good. Now he's being judged on this 1-hour performance. Suffering always feels unfair. Sometimes then when you actually get through the suffering or down the road, it can actually make you a stronger person. Not that you would want to go through it again, or not even that you're glad you went through it. I mean, suffering is just a part of life, I guess. But I guess what I was saying is, Tim feels very connectable here, the way he's questioning the suffering. But could you imagine what Tim would be like if he hadn't gone through the suffering he had been through? How would that have changed him? Would he be as strong a character now as he is?
I guess my concept of, first of all, this isn't disputing either of you, because first of all, everything you guys are saying about suffering and how it makes people stronger and all that, I actually agree with. But I would expand that to adversity in general. And when I say adversity, I would also include things as simple mistakes that we make and how we learn how to grow and deal with them. I think making a mistake makes us sympathetic to others. I think that, there's little things in our life that are mishaps. As small as mishaps, which I would, I'm throwing in a very broad definition when I talk adversity here. Mishaps and things that happen to us. All those things make us sympathetic to somebody else when they go through it, and they relate to how we look at life. And I think they, in many ways, do make us, hopefully, if we grow beyond them, a better person. So, our own mistakes, mishaps, things that have happened to us, which, I don't know that they have to go to the level of being suffering, but I do think in little tiny pieces, they chip away and start forming. If we all start off as a clay block, they start chipping away and forming the person that we become. So I do think that they're all elements of who we are. So just a dumb mistake that you've made as a child, or a dumb mistake that we make as an adult, no matter how tiny it is, I think those little things that we often don't give a lot of weight to, that also fall in those categories, are also a part of forming that person. So I'm not disputing either of you. Everything you guys said, I totally agree with. But I also think it doesn't have to be as big as all that. I think it can be smaller things that we often don't acknowledge that add up over time. The little things mean a lot. Yeah. They pile up after a while, and they become, I think, just as powerful as one instance of suffering. But you need a lot of them to measure up to that. But they do form. I don't think a person has to go through suffering to be the kind of person that Tim Drake is. I think they need to go through a lot of little tiny things along the way. But I think you can without I think you're left really scarred when you go through what Tim Drake did, as we're seeing in this issue. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think we would have a completely different Tim, who I don't even think would be Red Robin if his mother and father had lived.
Oh, yeah.
Now with the mom passing away initially, and had the father lived through identity crisis, would we still have Tim? Yes. Would we still have him as Robin?
We did. We did. Yeah. Keep in mind, though, when Tim first started, we did have him before all that.
But would that Tim, if his father was still alive when Bruce disappeared, would Tim have gone through that evolution that he went through? To prove to everyone that Bruce was alive? I don't know. On one hand, I'm thinking he would tell his father, "Hey, I know he's alive. You got to trust me, Dad." And he'd be like, "I trust you. Go and do your thing." Well, but would he?
Is it
have
just
been Red Robin?
Well, I guess here's my question: is it just suffering and adversity that makes somebody? I think it's a very sorry world if that's all that makes somebody. I think that those have an effect on a person, but I think the good values. I'm going off to like how his parents raised him, his encounters with Bruce. Dick Grayson. Going in the comic world that Tim Drake was raised in, none of those people died. I still think we're going to have a different, maybe not Red Robin, we'll have a Robin or whatever you want to, whatever character role he would be taking. But I still think he'd be on the path of the straight and narrow. I still think he would be willing to put himself at risk. There would just be other people to consider. I don't know that this issue would have played out the same way, though. I don't think he'd be having this crisis of faith. He'd be a different person because of it. So I agree with you on the sense that he wouldn't be that. But I do think he'd still be a hero, because he was a hero before all that happened to him. And I do think that was because of a lot of the positives in his life. Not necessarily. So I don't think the negatives are the only thing that make a person. I feel very bad for us as a people if that is the only thing that make a person. I do think the way we do, going back to our original discussion point, do I think that suffering and adversity will have a value to somebody if they work past it? And I think that's the key. It's how we
Right.
work past suffering and adversity does say a lot about our central character at a core. But I do think Tim is still the guy who could work past that suffering and adversity if he didn't go through it. I guess is what I'm saying. I think you do have to have a certain core value to who you are in order to work past it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's not just suffering that makes you who you are. But I guess I was just sort of connecting with it in the very thing that whenever people do suffer or have gone through suffering, it can leave a big mark on them. And if they can work through it, it often makes them a stronger person. Sometimes they get stuck and can't work through it.
Yeah. I guess that's my point. I think that Tim is able to work through it in the comics, and see, this is where I it's one of the reasons why I like that sometimes we don't have that firm definition of what religion totally is in the comic book universe, because I think you can make your own interpretations, and a lot of what Mark's saying here, I totally agree with, in the sense that I think we've seen this kid grow up. And it's a unique experience with Tim because of how long this character's been in comics and how much we've seen him grow from a young boy into the man that we see in the comics today. I think we got to see that this guy had good core values long before the adversity. You know, he got to see what Bruce and Dick were going through, who went through that adversity at a very young age, and he went through it older than at least my concept of what Bruce and Dick did. Or at least he got to be a superhero before going through that adversity, which really it was that adversity that led Bruce and Dick to become superheroes. Tim was there ahead of time. He was there because it was cool. And I mean, it was interesting to see his journey, that he's just a good kid. And yes, he went through all that, but I think his core values, much like Bruce and Dick's, I think Bruce was raised by good parents. I think Dick Grayson was raised by good parents and had a good family values and all that. And I think that led to him getting past his adversity. But a lot what Mark's saying, I don't think everybody can get past it. I think that's why we've got villains in the real world and in comics. There are people who can't work past those things and feel the need to punish others because of either the tiny mishaps, as I referred to earlier, or the big suffering that they've gone through, because they don't know how to get past all that. And I think those are defining qualities. So I don't think it's adversity that necessarily makes a person good. I do think a good person can work past it and gain something from it, though. Which is I think this is another great example of where this issue. It's why I'm glad that we got to talk about this one, because I think I don't think we're going to be able to, even in this deep discussion we've had, do this issue, the amount of justice that I think a person can do personally. And I do urge people to reread this and try to connect with it on a personal level, because of a lot of the discussion we're having here, because I'm greatly enjoying this.
Yeah, one of the things I always liked about Tim was he always, and this is the way I saw him, he always seemed to have Batman's mission, but it was, and I guess this would be before Identity Crisis, before his dad died, it seemed he was part of the mission just because he believed in it. And so it was almost like he had Batman's mission without Batman's demons or darkness from having lost both his parents. And so to me, he seemed sort of like Batman, but a little bit lighter, I guess, would be the way I would describe it.
Yeah.
And then reading Identity Crisis, it just sort of, that was a very powerful story that really, I felt bad for Tim when he lost his dad, almost like a close friend who had lost their parent. Just reading him, because at that time he was a superhero more by choice than being forced into it by tragedy. So that was something I always liked about it. But the person Tim was, coming from the Drake side and then through the mentorship of Bruce, and, he's been able to become even stronger of a person, is I guess how I see him.
And I think we're seeing a Tim who, in his journey, has, and I don't know if you guys agree with me on this or not, I think one of the areas where I find him stronger now is I think he headed down a path for a while there where he was becoming a lot more like Bruce. And while I think he still has some of those elements in him, like with, his little list that he's keeping of people that he's tracking and things like that, I think the distinction is the people that he's really monitoring are not those closest to him, unlike Bruce.
Yeah.
I think his list is distinctly different of people that, you would naturally question those situations. But I think that this Red Robin that I'm seeing now, especially when the costume change, and the costume change to me is not just a visual. I thought at that point it was about him, a period of acceptance for himself that, like, he had completed a journey, maybe come past the suffering that we were all talking about. You know, he come to terms, like, maybe finally not just his dad's death, but what happened with Bruce, a lot of his own uncertainties in his life, and he's becoming a lot more certain. That's not to say he's perfect. We see in this issue he's not. But he's certainly a lot more mature, a lot more there, a lot more solid than he's been before. And I think he's a lot more the Tim, connected to that Tim Drake. I think that's, well, why do we keep calling him Tim Drake? Because I think we are feeling that he's that kid again, to a certain extent. You know, those core qualities that I think have always been important, like, you know, Mark was talking about the lighter side that he brings to the Batverse. I really feel that is something that I'm seeing more out of him now in this. I don't know if you guys agree or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think the darker period, that's when he was searching for clues for Bruce and was it the Council of Spiders?
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah, when I was actually worried about Tim, that they were making him too much like Bruce. And then when he got back to Gotham and they had the whole thing where Ra's al Ghul tried to take over Wayne Enterprises, and the issue where he called in all the backup, that was the issue that let me know that Tim was back to the way he was supposed to be. Sort of like you said with the change of costume, was like with Batman. I don't think Batman would call in all these people. I mean, like Tim called in Superboy and Cassie. I think Batman would have used the people in his own family to protect them, but I don't know he would have called in people from outside of Gotham. But Tim, I see, is more of, I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to call him back up if I need it. And so it just let me know that Tim was back, and I was really glad that they did that, because I don't want to see him become too much like Bruce.
I don't either.
Yeah, amen. And, you look at it, if it had been Bruce handling it, there's no way he would have called in Superman and Wonder Woman. But Tim called in Superboy and Cassie, called in his friends, called in his family. It's, the whole Titans together type of mindset where Bruce is a member of the Justice League, a respected member of the League, but they're not, that's not his family. Now, the current Bruce we have now would go to Dick, would go to Tim, would go to, Stephanie, would, actually pull in his own little Bat universe, but Tim's always had that embracing of helping other, getting help from other people. So yeah, that was a cool moment seeing Tim, the way he took them down.
Well, one thing I liked about the journey, talking about Tim's journey into darkness there, was that we saw him gradually reach that end game. Like, I didn't feel like it was like he went down this dark path and bam, he called in backup. And I know you're not saying that, Mark. I think I'm actually building on what you're saying, because it's a lot of what I liked about the journey was that I started to see more and more glimpses of it as we got to that point, and I thought that was really great writing, because we saw this character who headed exactly the point where we were all worried about him. I think your comment about worrying about him, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm very worried. And that was something that I really enjoyed about the journey, was that along with the worry, I hit this certain point, I'm forgetting where it was, somewhere along that journey, though, I started to see glimpses of him reconnecting with himself, and it actually was as he started to find more clues that he was right, and starting to realize that, hey, I'm heading down a path here, and I've got to do this my way. I've got to be me when I do this, and not try to be anyone else. And I think as he started to connect with that and do that, we got these great moments where he finally did come back out, and we got the character that we're reading in this issue back again. And it is something that's a distinction between him, where I think we're seeing him then back to the core values, because I think Tim Drake, to all of us, is a very well-defined, very important character for who he's been since his childhood. And I love that he still feels like that character, and that coming back to that was very important for me.
Yeah, the other thing I like about Tim, which you see a little bit in this issue, and in the issue where he was fighting Ra's al Ghul, and even there's been a few other things, is one thing that I think differentiates him with Bruce. Bruce, when is in a fight, you always have the feeling, and Bruce has the feeling that he's going to win the fight, or he's going to win. With Tim, even in this, he has the feeling there's a good chance I'm going to fail at this because it's not a fair test. But when he was fighting Roz, he knew that Roz was going to beat him. He was just trying to buy time for the paper to get written or signed so he would be in control of Wayne Enterprises. Just the fact that he doesn't always have to win the fight himself or the battle himself, but he's always thinking about how to win the war long term. And I've always liked that about him. It just sort of differentiates him a little bit.
He's a scrambler. It's one of those, he's a Jackie Chan movie where he's fighting on this massive crowd and boom, 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 boom. You never know where it's going to go through, where Bruce has the more set and just the...
Yeah,
even though
Tim
Bruce
knows, though. Yeah, and there's a distinction there. I agree, and I'm not disputing you, so please don't get me wrong here. But the thing I love about Tim, and it is the reason why I really need to make a distinction there with what you're saying, Tim's an intelligent fighter. Mm-hmm. And as a combatant, in the way that with his size, the way he's compensated has to do with his brains. So I am not disputing you on the scrambling part. I love that when he's in a fight, you see him bam, 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 bam. But I always feel that he knows what he's doing at every single step. So to us, it looks like a blur sometimes of motion, but for him, it's polished in his mind when he's going through, and everything has a target, everything has a reason, every motion has a purpose. And we know that because of his training. And that's cool.
Yeah, I think he's a scrambling strategist is what I would call him if you mix the two. Like he even mentioned in this comic when he landed on the church, it was the church he had fought with Lady Shiva at. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that fight?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that I love that about Tim because other people, they're going to fight her and try to beat her. But he had planned way ahead and, hoped that her heartbeat would go up 4 beats. So what he had poisoned her with in the chocolate would knock her out or paralyze her or whatever it did. And that's just what I've always liked about Tim is he's willing a little bit to sacrifice his own self if it'll help him win the war in the future. Because he knows he's not going to win every fight.
I love that he acknowledges he cheated there. Yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of his strengths, too, is when you've got an intelligent character, they're going to walk into a situation like he did with Shiva and recognize that I can't, if I just go in there straight one-on-one, she's going to take me down. But I got a, brain up here that, I'm going to outthink her. And he did. And I thought that was just such a great story because of it. And I'm glad... See, to me, that's where continuity works for all of us. That whether you're reading this character a long time or not, I think you need those reference points where maybe a newer Red Robin reader can be going, okay, I kind of want to go back and see what he's talking about. What fight was Shiva? And I think that's it's the great thing nowadays about being able to seek out trades and being able to seek out back issues and being able to do that is there's an incentive to go back through the history of the character and follow what he did growing up and how he became the person that he is today. That Shiva fight's a great one that you don't want to miss.
Yeah, I think that's great too for if you have been following the character for a while because it brings that story. It's almost like a geek out moment in comics. Sort of like watching Smallville, you see stuff in there that just makes you jump up and down because you recognize it from comics. But when I read that, and I don't read a long list of comics, there's probably only, I'd say 5 to 8 titles I try to follow. But so when it's mentioned in a comic of something that I've read before, it just makes me excited because it's like, hey, I actually know what they're talking about, and I can remember it and remember the story. And how much I enjoyed reading it. For new readers to the comic because it makes them want to go get it, but it's also good if you've been following a comic before because it makes you remember the great stories you've already read.
I like it when it's between 2 characters, 2 or 3 characters or more, whatever. When they have that moment that they connect and you connect with it too, it makes you a part of their experience. Because it does, like you're talking, exactly what you're talking about right now, that's that emotional connection, which I think is great. And Robin has been filled with that throughout the years, with the supporting cast and the main cast, and it's a rich part of the book.
Oh, no, you don't!
Hey, Sean and Jim, this is Raphael Fan. I'm actually calling to leave a film message. You see that NBC has passed on the Wonder Woman show, and I actually think that's a good thing because the looks of that show is that it might have been a disaster, and it would have gotten canceled really quick, and that would have hurt the chances of a Wonder Woman film. So my thinking is that with the success of Thor, that might actually help the Wonder Woman film. Now, DC fans and maybe you guys might not know that Thor and Wonder Woman kind of connect because Thor is a Norse mythology character, and Wonder Woman is very steeped in Greek mythology. And the success of Thor being as a film shows that that kind of character can get over in the film, and more people know Wonder Woman than Thor. Wonder Woman's arguably one of the biggest characters, not in comics because, you know, her comics don't really sell well, but I'm talking about being known. Wonder Woman's the biggest female character. You know, you have Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, the Hulk. And then for females, you have Wonder Woman. I mean, Wonder Woman is known as any of those 4 characters I just mentioned. So Thor being a success and proving that it could be a success, I think actually helps Wonder Woman making a movie. I think Warner should take a good look at the success of the Thor film and see, well, you know, if Marvel could do it with Thor, a character that's nowhere near as known as Wonder Woman, why can't we do it with Wonder Woman? This, of course, may hinge on the success of the Green Lantern film. And, you know, I'm hoping that the Green Lantern film is a success because I think competition is good. I would love to see some DC characters on the screen like they have the Marvel characters. And I definitely think that that show wouldn't have helped Wonder Woman. That show looked as bad from the get-go, and I think it would have gotten canceled really quick, and that would have made Warner look at it like, you know, maybe Wonder Woman can't be a successful film. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe they look at the fact that NBC didn't pick up Wonder Woman, that maybe, you know, maybe we should not look at Wonder Woman, but I'm kind of hoping they do. We've had Superman, we've had Batman, we've had, now we have Green Lantern. You know, that's Wonder Woman's supposed to be part of their trilogy, you know? If Marvel could have Spider-Man, X-Men, and Hulk and Thor and Captain America, and even Daredevil and Ghost Rider and stuff like that, they've had a lot of films. Why can't DC do that? I hope that they take a look at the success of a character like Thor that, you know, no one really knows. And they say, we could do this for Wonder Woman. Other than that, I love this show. I'm glad to see that the incident has, the Superman incident story has brought a lot of conversation. It's not just a one-sided thing. You can't just look at it one way, and I really dig that. So thanks.
As always, a great phone call and a great conversation. And I do hope our show shows a willingness to show both sides of an argument. Obviously, Jim and I, there's times where we agree, and if somebody calls in and they're in a different viewpoint, it's going to look like we don't care about that opinion. That's not true. In this particular case, I think you and I have a lot of things in common, and I think we have some differences that, while they might seem major, they really aren't. I think we both have the same beliefs. We don't want this character to get lost in the shovel. We want to see this character on the big screen. Here's my thing. The only thing we, as comic fans, actually saw with Wonder Woman was some screenshots. Now, I want to go back to like when Hawkman, who's one of my favorite characters, was going to appear on Smallville. That isolated screenshot, I'm going to be honest with you, I wasn't too sure about it because I have in my own mind an impression of what I want Hawkman to look like, and a lot of it is a lot of the work of like Dale Eaglesham, for example, when he was working on JSA, and you saw, you know, Carter with this harness on and this big, strong, hulking man, but then not just that, there's an intelligence to him. There's the archaeologist, but he is this guy that you figure can snap on the other end to his personalities. So when I saw the shot and I saw that they were using like a breastplate instead of that, and I saw the wings, at first, I'm going back to the initial appearance that they were going to do of Hawkman, I was worried. And that was my initial reaction of it. And it wasn't until I saw it in action, in motion on the screen, and I saw the storyline with him and how accurate it was, and got to see it all in context, that it worked for me. Green Lantern costume, the one that just came out. I've There's been times when I first saw it brought up that I was excited that we're finally seeing a live-action Green Lantern costume. Then I wasn't sure about the glowy nature of it. Then I got really into it. So I don't know that we're right in making the assumption that the NBC show or the pilot that NBC passed on was necessarily a bad pilot because of some isolated screenshots that we never got to see. That doesn't tell the premise, the context of the story, what the writing was like. And a pilot is something, the reason why you throw out a pilot typically is to get some feelers and look at what worked and what didn't. And I have a funny feeling that I don't think the issue was that it was broken. I think NBC's superhero efforts as of late have not done very well, so I think they might be gun shy. I don't think it's a good thing for Wonder Woman to have it passed on. I don't think that's a good thing for the character. I don't think it increases the chances of it being put onto a film. The Whedon film. Look, let's go back to the history of Wonder Woman on film recently. The Whedon film that was supposed to be a launch and a go, when that thing failed, we didn't hear anything for ages about Wonder Woman. Then we heard about this TV series, and I'm worried that because if this thing doesn't go somewhere, that we might not hear anything about Wonder Woman at all. Now, if it's a bad pilot, not a bad pilot, I'm sorry, if it winds up being a bad series, is that good for the character? No. But I don't think a few screenshots of a costume necessarily indicate it's a bad pilot. I think good writing and a good story can win people over on a costume. It did for me with Hawkman, and that's a great example for me where I was not so sure about that. The Dr. Fate look, I wasn't totally sure about at first, but then the writing of the character in that JSA episode won me over on that. And it's a point where I really started to like that. So there were some things, when they Smallvilleized some of those costumes, I needed to see the writing. I needed to see them in motion for it. And I think Wonder Woman could be the same thing. I don't think it's a good thing when these things are passed on. Whether it's right to pass on them or not. So you might be right. Maybe there was a reason to pass on it. Maybe it was awful. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I would love to see it to make my own judgment on, hey, could they have given this thing a go? Could they have made it work? Was there enough interesting premise there to carry a series and develop the character in a point where people would understand who she is and where she comes from? Another thing, too, a lot of our listeners, including Jim and myself, are Marvel fans. I think, we do a DC fan podcast. It doesn't mean we don't like Marvel. I grew up reading Marvel. Thor, a lot of my reading of Thor came from the Walt Simonson run, which was absolutely brilliant. But I haven't always been a Thor fan growing up. Animated versions of him. There's those old Marvel animated ones where it was like that stop-motion comic booky style. I'm going way back. I loved those. They reran those on Nickelodeon years ago, and they were tremendous. I'm going back way years ago with Nickelodeon. And it was some of the first time that I saw those. All the way through, and they had some Thor thrown in as a guest in a lot of those, and they Captain America, Iron Man, and I love seeing those Marvel comics come to life. But a lot of my experience with Thor as a kid was reading his books at flea markets. I totally 100% agree with you on the mythology being a draw. I don't think if you ask the average person in Hollywood, though, that, hey, Thor made it, so let's do a Wonder Woman movie, that they're going to make that connection. That's quite a leap for somebody to make. And I would hope that, and the other thing is, too, we got to sit there and say, well, a lot of times people throw out DC Comics as a company. Why are they not pushing it because of that? I think this is one of the reasons why your DC Entertainments and things like that have been formed. The comic company itself has nothing to do with that. That would be the media department, which is the larger arm of the DC Entertainment, the more the Warner Brothers arm, I should say. They would have the first opportunity to go after those films. But, your comic book end of it, they haven't in the past had the ability to influence that or have a say. I don't know what's going to happen with Wonder Woman here. I don't like something being passed on with that character because I think she is an iconic, recognizable character. I think everything you said with her, with video games like God of War out there being incredibly successful in its mythology, Thor being successful with its mythology, I think those are elements they should be focusing on in Wonder Woman. And I would love to see that part of it. I don't think that needs to be the only, and it should be the only element of Wonder Woman that should be focused on, though, because that's not all she is. And it's those distinctions of that being a strong part of her, but then also having that superhero aspect of her that you get to see as well. Wonder Woman can tell a variety of different kinds of stories. One of the reasons why I adored and loved the Gail Simone run is it harkened back to, from my childhood straight on through, my favorite Wonder Woman stories. She could go anywhere, she could do anything. Writers have the opportunity to play with this character because she just kind of works in a fantasy environment. She works in a very grounded, real-world environment. She works in a very straight superhero environment. She works in a mythological environment where you go through that kind of history as well. So everything you're saying, amen, I agree with. I don't think canceling a TV show, though, is something where I'm like, I would have rather seen them retool, rework the pilot, try to repitch it. And maybe we'll see that, because there is rumors that they might be shopping it around elsewhere. But I'm hoping that, they took whatever criticisms there were. And obviously there were some. I mean, that's what happens with a pilot. I've seen a lot of pilots on DVD collections and DVD sets of projects where the pilot was very different. They recast characters, they reworked characters, they dropped characters or added characters to try and capture a new style of premise to better reach a larger audience base. So whatever was going on, I was glad to see a pilot made. I don't think dropping the progress of that project is a great idea at all without us having seen it. What was it like? I don't know. One costume does not make me think that. Because the honest reality is they could have done the greatest costume in the world, one that pleased every fan ever. And I don't know that that's possible when you're adapting these suits that have been painted on to characters, where they're being drawn and then colored, and the bodies are made to fit the costume. The real world is when you're getting actresses and actors to play these characters, you have to make a different style of outfit in order to make the actor look like the character in the comic. You can't redraw the actor and say, hey, we're going to put this much poundage on your legs and we're going to do this with you to make this costume idea that we have look really great. It doesn't work like that in real life. So, I mean, even if they did find the perfect actress look who would fit into, I don't know which costume you would go with. Do you go with the classic? Do you go with the current one that's in the comics? I don't know. But in either case, if you do the perfect costume that pleases every single fan, the show premise, that's what's going to drive that. And without seeing that pilot, without actually seeing what the premise was and how it worked on the screen, I have trouble saying that this thing was bad and that it was a good idea that it was canceled. Because there could have been a lot in there that could have been easily reworked, put out, and made a very successful TV series. I know you and I talked on Facebook about this, and one of the problems, I think, is I don't know that a Wonder Woman show on NBC is necessarily, and it's no insult to NBC, is necessarily a great idea. I look at a Wonder Woman show, and what needs to make it successful is you need to go kind of the Buffy Xena route, where you do one of these like CW style station or networks or TNT or TBS or something like that, where you can go real hardcore fan, do something a little edgier that's a little bit different than you would see on a main network, and reach that kind of audience base, where you'd see like a Fringe and stuff like that. So I think that's what really is needed for a Wonder Woman to work on the small screen, and I don't think that her being on the small screen means that there would be no film. I think if they have a popular television show on the small screen, it would lead to this film that's been in development hell. Look at the Whedon film. Look back at the history of that and how long that thing was in development, where we all thought, hey, we're finally getting a film, and that never happened. So, and look at some of the reasons why that never happened. And we talked about movies like Salt and how, those put characters on our Facebook discussion for anybody who didn't get to see it. We were throwing out references to films with female characters that didn't work recently, and one of the reasons why they might be gun-shy with a female character. But then films like Salt and things like that did do very well commercially. And that's why I reference shows like Buffy and Xena. Very great commercial successes, and I do think a Wonder Woman series could work written well. Whether it's on the big screen or the small screen, or my personal preference is both. I do think it's a character that works both. I think you do multiple premises. Stephen King's doing it right now with things like The Dark Tower. This is a novel that has now become a very successful comic book series that is going to be a film and a TV show. And they interconnect. And I don't know why we can't do that with the comic book characters like a Wonder Woman or something like that. And I would love to see that. And I do think maybe a small screen might be a great way to launch that character and get people to really get to know what's cool about her. That's where you can explore the mythology, but then do a real-world-rooted television series as well, and tell the kind of stories that Wonder Woman, and only Wonder Woman, can tell. So I don't know. I do think a lot of this, when you listen back to it, and as I was listening to your call, I'm like, well, I agree with that. I think ultimately, overall, we want the same things. We want good Wonder Woman, and we want to see it on the screen. That's what we all want as fans. I think none of us are really sure how to get it there. We're baffled that it's not there. I'm worried that something like this being canceled is showing that they're still gun shy over the character.
Sean, Jim, Don Sanderson. I just watched the Smallville episode. And while I did cry, and I did laugh, and I did cheer, I thought, and, you know, it was extremely well done, but still left disappointed that there wasn't at least a whole second hour of Superman action alongside Martian Manhunter and Green Arrow and Black Canary and Flash and, you know, I mean, and I thought that the pushing away Apocalypse at the end was just too easy of a fix. So anyway, I mean, it's been an amazing 10 years. I've watched every season, and, you know, more power to having superhero programs to watch and enjoy. And it truly was one of the finest shows that's been on TV in the last decade, and millions of people agree with that. But and it was cool to see Clark in the suit, although candidly, I don't know that I like seeing him in it as much as I like seeing like Brandon Ralph in it. So Ralph, pardon me. Needless to say, the end of an era, and I thought that a lot of the scenes with Lois. I thought the Val scene with Lois and Clark was very touching, and the very final scene with her in the Daily Planet with the new incarnation of Jimmy Olsen was very cool, and the scene on Air Force One, which was just right out of the Superman Returns film, was very cool too. But I mean, I didn't get to watch it the night it was on because I was working, and I watched it Saturday night, the night after. I've been waiting with bated breath all day. Loved it, but I didn't completely go orgasmic over it because I needed to see my Superman in tights flying around for a lot more than the last 20 minutes. So, all right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great night. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I can't wait to hear what you and all your listeners have to say about it on the podcast. Take care.
I'm not going to go too crazy with this now because we're heavily going to discuss it on our next episode. We're going to be doing Smallville and Flashpoint. It's a recording that Jim and I are planning to do. We both decided we were going to do it before this one. We were going to record it and release it before this one. But we both decided we really wanted to sit down and watch the episode at least once more, maybe twice if possible, and really do some notes on it and get some of our thoughts independent of each other. We watched it together with our buddy Chris Kendall and had a great experience of it. I'd like to watch it isolated and just get my own thoughts on what I liked and what I would have wanted to see more of. I will say one thing. The premise of the show was never meant to be about Superman flying around in the costume. And that's not going to please everybody. I'm not saying you're wrong for feeling the way that you do, because when you were saying I'd love to see him with Martian Manhunter doing the Justice League thing and all that, I would have loved to see all that too. But I think ultimately, as we were watching it, I kept telling the guys, I'm like, geez, I wish there'd be another hour, another 2 hours, another 3 hours. You know, I would have loved to see another season of him as Superman. And that's ultimately, I think, what you should feel at the end of the show. That you want more, you want to see more, instead of going, I'm glad it's done. And I don't feel that way from this, and that was kind of my overall impression. And like I said, we'll talk more about it next week, so I don't want to go too crazy into it, other than to say, I think that there's a lot of people who feel, you know, a lot of different ways about the Smallville episode at the end. And I was glad to see that it tied up as much as possible. And I'm going to leave it at that for right now. Next week we'll talk more in details, because I mean, there's things that, you know, I wanted to see more of, I wanted to know more of, and I think that would be better suited to talk about on the show more well. But that's in next week. And thanks for sharing those thoughts. And we do welcome anybody's phone calls if you want to call in and give us your specific thoughts on the episode, what you liked, what you didn't, and we'll be glad to put them on that episode next week as well. But thanks, Don. Actually, give me a great chance to kind of promo what we're doing next week on the show and why we waited to do that episode. So thanks a lot, Don, as always.
Hey, guys, it's Bobby C., also known as Star Wolf Oakley on the forums. Well, Smallville has come to an end, and I was hoping for a little more of the big Clark Darkseid fight than Clark basically flying through Lionel Luthor 2's animated corpse and exploding it. And it was a little confusing to see, like, a tiny version of Superman pushing Apocalypse somewhere, being through a boom tube. I wasn't quite sure what we were supposed to think about that. I've liked Smallville over the years. I haven't watched every single episode, and sometimes it is a little obvious that the show doesn't have the biggest budget, even for a sci-fi show on the CW. But it did quite well with what it had, and I sometimes wondered if they should have tried to do a third universe as well as the Earth 2 universe, because as much as people say they wanted to see Tom Welling in a full Superman costume, if they had done a third universe where we get to see Tom Welling say, "My name is Bruce Wayne," the fans would have gone crazy with glee. That's, of course, borrowing from the Elseworlds story Speeding Bullets, and where Kal-El's spaceship lands in front of Wayne Manor, and he's adopted by Thomas and Martha Wayne. Pretty good story if you guys ever want to review it or check it out. Well, I know NBC passed on Wonder Woman, and that other show, Human Target, is canceled. So for now, it seems absolutely no show on the networks or the cable is based on a comic book, which can be good or bad, because, as I've said, if you're going to do this, you should try to do it with as high a budget, maybe not a super budget, because, you can throw a lot of money on it, and it doesn't need much without a good story, good actors, and good dialogue. But what do I know, really? Anyway, regarding the Young Justice series, which for now seems to be the only way we can see Superman on TV, I am wondering whether they're going to go with the Superboy story. Is that Superboy going to get the names Con-El and Connor Kent? And is he going to find out Clark Kent is Superman on the show? And how is that going to be done? Because I don't think they're going to do it the way they originally did it in the comic books, where Superboy found out by traveling through hypertime. And I don't remember the exact issue. When Superboy meets the Silver Age Superboy, there's the dialogue, "You're Clark Kent, and you aren't Clark Kent?" I think that's how it went. And there are two good issues of Superboy 70 and Superman 155, which have two great stories about Superboy's angst over finding out Clark Kent is Superman and being kind of hurt that Superman didn't tell him. And there's this thing with both him and Lois, and a him with Clark Kent at the Kent farm, where you get the feeling he wants to say but can't ask, "Are you really Clark Kent? And if you are, why didn't you tell me?" That was a pretty big deal for him as a character, and I am wondering how Young Justice will cover it. One last thing, going back to the last episode of Smallville, I wonder if they were making some kind of political statement that President of the United States is a mind-wiped clone. Is that some kind of political commentary? It says, "Oh, that's not really Lex Luthor at all. It's a pieced together clone of him with no memories whatsoever." That was a rather puzzling end to the Lex Luthor saga in Smallville, just from my own personal view. Anyway, I could talk about Superman for hours on end, but once again, keep up the good work, and I'll call you some other time. Bye.
The Lex Luthor thing, I do think you're reading too much into that. I don't think that was meant to be that commentary. That's actually something, and this is an issue, you said you didn't watch all the episodes of Smallville. There was images in the past, and it's actually a reference to the DC Comics lore that Lex Luthor became the president. The mind-wiping of Lex Luthor was not done as a political commentary. That was done to show us how Superman could grow into the Superman that we know in the comic books, and Lex Luthor doesn't know his secret identity. That was really what that was all about. The fact that he was put in as a president was something that was an image that was shown earlier years of Smallville in one of the seasons where there was a projection of the future, and we saw Lex in that suit as the President of the United States. So this is kind of a way of going back to something from the past of Smallville, bringing that cool thing to present day and saying that does happen. That image that we saw where we got to see Superman's cape, we got to see Lex Luthor's president, all those things are going to happen in Smallville's future. The series has finally come full circle to do those things. So for fans that watched all the episodes, it was a way of a wink and a nod to say, hey, look, all of these things did happen. Everything came to fruition just the way that it was laid out in the show. So I don't think that was meant to be a political commentary or slap to the face to a president or anything like that. It was really meant to be a way, the mind wiping was a way to show us that Tess Mercer is the reason why Clark's identity is safe. It was a great way to give her kind of that closure. So, and we'll talk more about that, like I said, next week. I want to comment on one other thing, though, when you were talking about the CGI Superman. It goes back to what Don was saying in the previous phone call as well. One of the things that I did like about the CGI Superman was some of the budgetary issues you were mentioning. We got to see him from a distance most of the time, and I never got to the point where I ever felt, when we did a close-up to him, it was more of Clark's head, and we got to see him look sort of majestic. I never got to the point where I felt like, wow, they really screwed up the Superman costume. I didn't ever want to feel that way. My preference with the show ending was always, if you're going to show us the suit, do it in such a way where I'm not going to feel let down by the suit, and keep showing the one from the Brandon Routh era, that style of it is a wink and a nod to the movies, the most recent ones, because it was it was kind of a cool way to show the real outfit. Showing him from the distance was a way where I'm not like, oh, it doesn't work on Tom Welling or something. I didn't have to make that judgment call, which I really liked as well. And like I said, a lot of this stuff we will talk more next week and more in depth. But there were some interesting things there, and it was a show that I thought they did a lot of cool things considering they were in a TV budget. It isn't a film budget. I can't wait to see the next Superman film to see what they do with a film budget, where this can go. And I'm curious to see where Superman does go from here. I would have loved to have seen, obviously, a bigger budget on Smallville where you could have done a whole other season with him as Superman. I would have loved that, absolutely. But that was never in the show's edict. That was never in the premise for the show. And we'll talk more about that later because it'll be fun to get Jim's thoughts on that as well. But thanks very much for the phone call. Young Justice is fantastic. It's a series I'm really loving. And I'm with you. I am wondering with Young Justice, I wanted to talk about this before we go anywhere. I am wondering with Young Justice, because they've pulled in a lot of really cool comic lore with these characters, and in ways that I thought has worked in an animated show. And so I think they're going to use as much from the comics as they can in a half-an-hour episode without bogging people down like they get confused. So I think we are going to see a lot of close-knit ties, and I actually really like that about the show, that it does feel very much to honor the classic continuity of these characters. Are we going to see him as Counter Kent? I don't know. Hopefully the show will be around long enough that we do get to see that. I don't want to see it right away. I want to see that, kind of evolve over time and see this character kind of grow. I'm digging it. It's a really good cartoon. It's very well written. I'm sad to see Human Target go. I was a big fan of it. I thought it was a fun show. I mean, was it, one of those shows that, I'm like, wow, it's mentally, challenging. I thought it was a great action-adventure show. And that's what it was supposed to be. It was fun. Sometimes, it's good to have that fun program that had a, cool little adventure story with a great cast of crew characters that I thought felt like a comic book show every week. And I liked it from that standpoint. And I'm really sad because I thought Season 2 added on a supporting cast, developed more into Chance's life, and I thought the character playing him was great, and I thought the supporting cast was great. It was great to see the actor who played Rorschach in the show as well. It is something, if you are a DC fan and you haven't ever checked out Human Target, check out an episode or two. It's a really fun show, and it does have that just great kind of comic book vibe, spy. I think fans of your James Bond type shows and James Bond type movies will like that kind of thing as well, because I'm a big fan of those, and I got that kind of vibe with it as well. It was a really nice adaptation, and the comic book miniseries I thought was a great companion piece to it that came out quite recently, and obviously the previous comic book stories as well. I really, really enjoyed Human Target, and I'm sad to see that go. So I don't know. With the Wonder Woman series going and all that, that's not the end of it, because we got a Green Lantern cartoon coming up, and I'm sure they're going to be, rolling out more TV series, more things in development. So who knows what's going to come next? I think it's an exciting time as comic fans, because For as many comic book properties that don't work on various screens, there's a lot of them that are. And so I think we're going to see more things being rolled out as pilots, more things being tried out, and more experiments to see what sticks and what networks are interested in. So who knows?
Hello, Sean and Jim. This is Sebastien from Quebec. Just calling. I just saw the final episode of Smallville, and I'm really on the high right now. The episode was amazing. I actually choked up at the end. The John Williams music, the suit, the whole thing. And right now I'm in my Superman on the Ruse, getting ready to watch a Superman movie marathon. And look, the show was amazing, kind of bittersweet. I wanted it to go on, but anyway, amazing. What can I say? Anyway, love you guys, love the show, and hope I'll call you in the future. Okay, bye-bye.
Actually, one of the things I really do love about this show is hearing familiar voices when people start calling into the show. So please feel free to call in anytime you want to. I actually really like when I heard his voice, I'm like, oh, hey, it's been a while since we've heard from him. So please feel free to call in again at any point in time, and that goes to everybody. One thing I want to shout out on the website, when he was talking about his views on Smallville, I have a poll up on the website about Smallville, so please feel free to participate in that. I think it's always fun for listeners to see where's everybody fall. And please vote. I put 3 different choices on there. It's either you loved it, fell somewhere in the middle, or it wasn't your cup of tea. So please, feel free to throw your thought on there and add your voice to the votes on the website. I'm going to try to, every week or so, put up a different poll, just as something strikes me as an interesting concept. Sometimes it'll come off of comments from forums or from websites from our show listeners, where I'm like, ooh, kind of, let's see what everybody thinks, and throw them out there, because I do like everyone's voice. I like people to be able to see that. Jim and I obviously podcast our opinions, but when the show's over, it is great to see what you guys think. And do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Do you fall somewhere in the middle? I like that kind of stuff. I think I love feisty conversations about comics. It's great that we can do this kind of thing. When you were talking about the music, that was another thing that really grabbed me as well. And that's something throughout the entire series. When Christopher Reeve was on as a guest, it was great to hear the music tied with him. And the same thing when Margot Kidder came on as a guest on the show. They tied the music to her as well. And I think those nods to these movies and the history of Superman as a character, it makes you feel nostalgic. It takes you back to a point in time in your life. And yet this series never felt dated. I think that's kind of cool, too. I do think we're going to hear a lot of it. I think this is going to be a commonality of a lot of people, is we all wanted more. Whether you liked what they did or not, I think we all wanted more, wanted to see more. Where could they have gone from there? You finally see this character in the suit, and I think they did something wrong if you didn't want to see more. And I think that would have been the major thing. And it was a funny thing, I was listening to all the voicemails, and one of the commonalities, everybody wanted more. Whether you loved it or you fell in different categories on it, everybody wanted something more, and they wanted to feel something more. And I think that's a sign that they did their job. I really do. So, I don't know. Like I said, we'll be talking more about this one next week. But, Sebastian, always great to hear from you, my friend. And please feel free to call in anytime. By the way, our show voicemail line, I want to make sure I get this into the episode. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. So, it takes you to the same voicemail line, and we love having you participate on the show, so please feel free to do those voicemails. We are an audio medium, so I do preference voicemails over emails, just because I think it's a great way to break up those segments, to have people actually hear your voice tone. Because a lot of times when I read emails in the past, which I used to do before we had a voicemail line, I used to read the emails on the show, I think I lost the tone of the listener, and I like you guys to be able to represent yourself that way. So please feel free to call in. We love having you on the show.
Hey, Sean and Jim, long time no talk. This is Chad Cadet. Was hoping to see you guys at the Super Show 2 weeks ago, and I guess Jim had other plans, and Sean had trouble with his basement, and I was sorry to hear that, and really looked forward to that time when I get to get to talk with you guys. fact, it's been a while since we actually spoke. I think last time we talked was at the Super Show, and I was supposed to call back and give a report about my thoughts on the Magog series, which was going on at the time. And even though I did finish it, I just never got around to it. I've been dealing with some health issues lately. But anyway, been trying to catch up on your podcast. It's kind of hard for me since I received my comics on a monthly basis, and so I have to stockpile issues or episodes of the show and listen to them as I read the books, since I don't want to be spoiled. Anyway, I was wondering if you guys had noticed in any of your DC books lately. I think since the beginning of the year, there hasn't been a month so far that I haven't received a book that has some sort of publishing error. The one that comes to mind for me was The Dark Knight #1, and even Brightest Day #23, Generation Lost. And for me, it just takes me out of the story when I am reading, and something doesn't jive, and one page kind of throws me off. And I was just wondering if you guys have found that in your books, or if DC just has something against me and my reading habit, which I hope they don't, since I pretty much buy everything that they have been putting out. Anyway, still enjoying the show. Maybe I'll try to keep in contact on a more regular basis and let you know what I think about what I'm reading. All right, keep up the good work, and happy 5 years of podcasting. I remember I first I ran it or found your show when I was moving from West Virginia up here to Albany, New York, and was looking for something to listen to on the long ride between here. And I remember the first episode when you guys covered Hawk World, and after that, I believe I was hooked. So again, I'm gonna quit rambling on here. Guess I'll talk to you guys later, and have a good one.
Actually, first things first, one of the things I really like about the show is, and I'm really glad when listeners tell us that they listen in a variety of different ways. Whether you listen to every episode, you stockpile shows, you listen to segments, you listen to broken episodes, however it works for you. I'm flattered that people listen in any capacity. So it's always nice for me to hear. I really enjoy hearing that people find different ways to digest our podcasting. And like I said, I'd never take any worries for you stockpile a show, you want to wait. Our goal, and one of the reasons why we put a spoiler warning at the beginning, is we don't want to ruin books for anybody. That's not our goal. We want to talk about the context of the books, and we want people to know that we are going to do that. And the stuff that's on the show and that we put in the show notes, we're going to talk in depth about them with the intention that if you're reading the book and you want to hear commentary about it, you know that that's what we're going to do. If you're not reading the book and you want to hear what the book's all about and hear people chat about it, that's great too. We hear like all kinds of different mixtures. Please feel free anytime to call in about old content on our show. It's sometimes fun to revisit it. Even if we don't have much to say, just to hear your comments on it. So feel free to kind of come back in and say, hey, guys, a couple of months ago, I just happened to get around to this episode, and here's something you were chatting about, and here's just some of my thoughts on it. And sometimes it's fun to just hear that. Your comment about your reading habits, I should say, and like some section being jarring or something like that. And does DC have something against you? I obviously. One of the hard things this isn't just a DC thing. Let's talk about comics in general. For any publisher, whether it's an independent, it's one of the main publishers. Does they fall somewhere in the middle? I think it's really hard nowadays. I think there's a lot of different categories of comic companies, which I think is great. To label them anymore is kind of hard to do. In many ways, I think all of comics is independent because of sales numbers at the moment versus other media. But that's a whole other story. But as far as that, no, I think, obviously when you're picking up a comic book that's released in the comic shop on a certain week, the idea is they're publishing that as a periodical that's released during that week and meant to be digested and put out with the intention of it being digested that way. Does that mean that you can't pick them up monthly? Before I was doing the podcast, I actually had gone to monthly myself to save on shipping. And with the podcast, I needed to go to weekly to make sure that I'm getting all my books in a timely fashion so I could read them and be up to date for the show, for anything we're going to discuss, to try and hit like cool events, at least within a couple weeks of their release. So that way we're pretty current for people who want us to be current. And I like that we get back traffic otherwise. So no, I don't think that they have any prejudice against you. I think they're thrilled and flattered that you read their books. I think they try to write the books in a way and publish the books in a way that they're accessible to anybody. Are there going to be missteps in there? Sure, that's part of being human. And maybe and it might be just a misstep where maybe you read it a certain way and it didn't hit you, or you were jarred by a certain panel. Maybe somebody else wasn't. They read it differently. I've hit panels before, though, where I'm like, whoa, that kind of took me out of it for a little bit. I've gotten pretty good at just kind of moving along. And in rereads, or maybe rereading an issue or something like that, or reading another title where I connected with it, then I'll go back and revisit that book. Then all of a sudden I see that panel differently, if that makes any sense. And I'm not saying that that's always right or that my experiences necessarily fit everybody else's. But no, I don't feel that, first of all, any company that's a business, to be prejudiced against anybody who's going to put their dollar down for it, for the way that they like to buy the media, would be insane. So no, they aren't out to get you. On a little bit of a side note, actually, too, I want to shout out Chad and the Comic Geek Speak Super Show. We were not able to go this year. I had flooding in my house. Ohio storms hit, and I'm sure a lot of you who've been watching the news media saw we got nailed. And not only did I have my basement flood, but I have a sump pump down there. We had power outages where the power was out for a couple of days, which meant that I had a sump pump, and it had a battery, but the battery runs out very quickly when you don't have any power going to it. So I had a big mess on my hands. It could have been worse. I had a lot of things in plastic crates and stuff like that, so I didn't really lose much, but it was a matter of, it happened the week of Super Show. And Super Show for me is well over a 6-hour drive. It was like I believe it's about a 7-hour drive. All depends if I stop off along the way, and my wife was going to come with me. And I couldn't take off on Friday. I was only going to be able to come up on Saturday, and I was going to leave on Sunday to Super Show because I'm a teacher and I worked on Friday. So my goal was, and I've done that in the past with Super Show. I've come up on Saturday. I'm usually there about noon, spend the whole day with everybody, go out in the evening with everybody, and then end up leaving Sunday afternoon at some point, stopping by the show again just to kind of visit. It's one of my favorite conventions. Comic Geek Speak in general, their events have, because I went to the first Comic Geek Speak event as a fan and a listener, which I still am, of Comic Geek Speak. So I just wasn't able to go because of events on this end. And Jim wasn't because of a good friend of ours. Jim was a part of, I believe it was the First Communion that he was at. I might be wrong on that, but there was something going on at that point in time for that weekend, so he was not going to be going. So my wife and I were going to drive up, and unfortunately that fell apart. I will definitely be at the next Super Show. I kind of went through withdrawal. I've been at all their events, and it actually broke my streak. But I will definitely be popping back into Super Show for the next time around, and I miss seeing you too. Actually, Chad is one of a short list. There's only been, aside from Jim and myself, there's only been a couple people that have actually been here at my house recording with us. And Chad is one of, I think, 2 people that have been here and done it. So he has a distinction. I think he was the first one, actually, that was ever here and recorded with us. My friend Chris Kendall, I think, was the second. So, interesting distinction with Chad. And we had him on and we talked Ambush Bug. So, Chad, always good to talk to you. And like I said, listeners, please feel free to call into the show about topics from the past, the present, anything that interests you with comics. A lot of times it's just great to get your thoughts on there. And even if you're not calling in with questions for us specifically, but you just want to get your comments on the show. Say, hey, I was reading this, and, whether it's something we talked about on the show or not. There's a lot of DC out there. We don't talk about every comic they publish just because we don't have the time. I wish we could do like an 18-hour podcast or, release multiple episodes during the course of the week where we could pull that off. But we're not always able to do it to get every comic book represented on the show. And if there's an issue of something where you're like, guys, I just want to shout this out because it's fantastic, and it's a series that I'd like people to be looking out for. This issue struck me in a different way, or maybe it was a series you weren't enjoying and all of a sudden it clicked, or there's all kinds of different avenues. Or you got a comment like Chad said where, hey, I was reading Generation Lost and this panel kind of hit me. I'm always a fan of listening to other people's experiences with books, especially if they're being delivered differently, because I can't speak to getting my comics delivered monthly because I don't have them delivered monthly. I end up reading my books weekly. So that's an interesting commentary on that. And I don't know if anybody else had similar experiences. So anyway, thanks a lot.
You won't get away from me this time, Buster.
Our next episode, we are going to be discussing Flashpoint and Smallville. If we have any time left over, we're also going to be discussing in it's like a speeding bullet style segment, just things we're enjoying about some of the other current comics that are out. Otherwise, we'll save that for a future show. The episode after that, which has already been recorded, is going to be Green Arrow Longbow Hunters, issues 1 through 3. We are joined by Peter Rios from Comic Geek Speak, and we had a really in-depth discussion about that classic series from the 80s, which is available right now on the app. It's one that's out of print, but I do recommend checking your local comic shops, checking conventions. If you haven't read that series, it's one you definitely want to pick up and read. It's a great Mike Grell story, or grab it from DC's app and join us for that discussion. And usually we do trades for this type of thing, but it was something that we have been wanting to discuss for some time. I do encourage you, if you go to a convention, ask DC to put this baby back in print, because I think it's a story that needs to be in print. So that's going to be the next couple weeks of shows for the podcast. We're going to be discussing Flashpoint, Smallville, some current comics, and Green Arrow Longbow Hunters on our next few shows. So I'm really excited for that. Once again, sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, Red Robin number 25, $2.99 regularly, 40% off, only $1.79. Check out the amazing deals on pre-orders over at DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, Red Robin the Grail, trade paperback, collecting issues 1 through 5, $17.99 regularly, 38% off, only $11.15. A great way to check out the series if you haven't been following it right from the beginning. Don't forget our friends over at the Summit City Comic Con, put on by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. June 18th, 2011, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Fort Wayne, Indiana, the Grand Wayne Center. That's SummitCityComicCon.com. Make sure to check that out. So we will see you next week.
Bye. Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see, Hawkman, your plan, and what you do to me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thenin Guard or Egyptian, working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman.